Good evening, race fans, and welcome back to TRTM for today's coverage of the dawn of a new time here in the Competizione Performance League as we get underway for the first round of the all-new Competizione Performance League World Series. As always, I'm Regan Clark. You join us here at the home of the British Grand Prix, of course, at the dawn of a new time here for Competizione Performance League. After technical delays earlier in the month, we are finally ready to get underway on this fantastic championship, hitting out at the world stage and starting our journey then over the course of taking a look into the calendar here. The next 10 rounds we find ourselves at the home of the British Grand Prix, right here straddling the county lines between Northamptonshire and Buckinghamshire at the Grand Prix circuit. Silverstone, founded in 1948 on the grounds of RAF Silverstone and comprised of 18 turns and 3.6 miles of FIA Grade 1. This is the epicenter of all things British motorsports, home of the British Grand Prix on 2 and 4 wheels from across MotoGP and Formula 1, was the site of the world's first ever Formula 1 race, the 1950 British Grand Prix that was won by Giuseppe Farina driving for Alfa Romeo. Today, however, it finds itself the home of the first round of the World Series here in Competizione Performance League, and heralding its arrival, two bizarre new layouts to join us over the course of this season, the first of which we'll get into in just a moment's time. You join us here at the end of free practice, about 8.5 minutes left to go here as we went live for the last 10 on board at the moment with David Tanguay. Taking a look then into where the calendar is concerned, of course we flashed that up just a moment ago, but getting a more in-depth look, we're here at Silverstone for the first round on February 21st, and the next round coming up just a week away will be the Circuit Paul Ricard for the first of the 120-minute races. We'll get more into the 3x40 race that we're going to see today when we get on to the discussion of the session itinerary. Further down the line in the series then, Imola, Watkins Glen, the Red Bull Ring, Spa, Barcelona, Bathurst, the Hungaroring and the Nürburgring are set to make all appearances on all 10 of these rounds of Season 1 of the World Series. It's going to be very exciting then to see how things play out here. Unlike what has been a bit more of a national crowd here on the Competizione Performance League, primarily drivers from North America with sprinklings of Europe and Oceania in there, this hits out at the world stage. Much more varied audience coming into this. Quite a few drivers we've seen before in other series now making their way into the world of the Competizione Performance League, as we see at the moment on board with David Tanguay. Before we get a look at the total scope of the grid here, with plenty of drivers to get through before the end of free practice, let's get on just quickly here to the discussion of the session itinerary. So we're coming to the end of what has been currently 4 hours of free practice. Started at around midday today, and now we pick up in the last 10 minutes. Coming up next then will be 30 minutes of qualifying, and then 3 40-minute races chained end to end, where neither of them featuring a mandatory pit stop between them. So it's going to be curious to see how this unfolds, because of course, as we've seen in other series to implement a similar format, we've noted that qualifying is going to be super important, because that will dictate all 3 of those starting grids. It doesn't run by a case where the finishing result out of race 1 will dictate race 2 and so on and so forth. It will be a static grid across all 3 races, dictated solely from the standing of qualifying. So that 30 minutes may very well find itself the most important feature of the entire event. As bear in mind, if you were to have a less than ideal first race, you could pick it up on the second or third, knowing you were starting in a good position out of qualifying. So getting back into the main session, as we see still on board here with Tanguay down through Maggots, Beckett's and Chapel, looking at the total scope of things at the moment, things have shifted dramatically over the course of the 4 hours of free practice on the run up towards qualifying today. Qualifying predictions will have you believe that Labay is looking to take this one by a landslide, but now we see more recently Zalan Such fastest in the number 45 Lexus. Of course, last time we saw him here on the Competizione Performance League was behind the wheel of the Audi R8. Now he heralds the arrival of the Lexus RCF, a formidable machine, and going toe to toe then with Christian Labay, who we've seen already made the debut for Ford over on the NLRL Sunday League. Of course, his first major appearance was actually in the one-off real world racing day at the Watkins Glen International Circuit, but now with a full competitive debut under his belt, Labay looks to take up the helm of 2 championships in with the Mustang. Behind them, Lucas Milch and Raphael Bayer, 2 drivers with Black Nitro Racing, whom of which we've seen before. As a matter of fact, saw very recently on the Console Endurance Series over on NLRL, both of them behind the wheel of the number 28. This time though, 2 Lamborghinis, the 28 and the 29. Rounding out the back of that top 5 then, Wright, a driver we've seen across both HCCL and the Competizione Performance League, this time driving in the 54 Lexus. Behind him, we see Kyle Jenkins in the 6th place car at the moment, the 113 5-star esports Ferrari 296, and he's ahead of Jonas Franke in the number 413. Now, this is a new driver on our radar here with Black Nitro Racing in the Porsche, a rather precarious choice here for the Black Nitro Racing team, a team that we've seen more recently shift away from Ford and over primarily to Lamborghini. So it's curious to see the appearance of Porsche in all of this. Further behind them, Brooklyn Donkin with Euro Titans. We see they're just snuck in behind the 65. And we see that's Sergio Belda with Holkianos Motorsports. Both of these two we've seen over on the Sunday League, over on NLRL. David Tanguay, we've of course been on with for some time here, made his debut in Season 1 of the GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series with Aston Martin. Has gone on to have quite the successful tenure since that day across both GT3 and GT4 as one of the main appearance talents of the Malois Racing team. Stefan Nicolai in the number 55 McLaren 720S. And then just outside of that top 10, we see Carl Martel in the 999. Now, further down the order, we see Richard Cecil competing from the AM category. It's worth noting here, we do have two distinct categories. The white placards there denote the Pro category. The red placards denote the AM category. So two distinct championships to play for over the course of the World Series here, giving every driver their fair chance. At the moment, at the forefront of the AMs appears to be two Porsches, for that matter. That being Jonas Franke with Black Nitro Racing, 7th overall, but leading in division. Then Richard Cecil here, 12th overall, but 2nd in division in the number 5, as we just see there a little bit of trouble for him down through Brooklands and in towards Luffield. Charlie Harker we saw in the original running of this championship's first round, which some astute viewers may remember happened earlier on this month but was forced to be red flagged, hence why we are now starting again today. Did originally start that in the AM category, but has now been reallocated position in the pros, so it appears. The number 72 Mustang currently in the paddock. Jorge Martinez, a driver we've seen here on the Competizione Performance League in both GT3 and GT4 for Porsche. Ever the faithful with the number 1, the golden Porsche 992. Of course, we saw that across the line in the Real World Racing Day at Watkins Glen, leading the AM category. So it's curious to see what he'll be able to do up in the pros for the duration of this championship. Timo Tosto out on track at the moment in a very curious pick, the Audi R8. Very rare to see one of those kicking about. Now, of course, I think back to a few different championships. One that we covered quite recently was MSC's final round of Season 3. We had a driver in there, the number 122. That was quite the big fan of the Audi R8. Now we see the 58 in the R8 as he makes his way down towards the hangar straight. Further down the line then, Sergio Belda, of course, we saw earlier on, just as we were getting on board with the number 17, we see that in front of him was the 65, and now we see him center frame. Sergio Belda, one of 3 drivers to have fielded entry for the Holkianos Motorsports team. Alongside him will be JM Quito, we see further down in the paddock there, and then that makes 3's company for the Mustangs, with Ivan Sanchez yet to have put a time on the charts in the trailing end of free practice. Further down the line then, Brandon Carr, a driver we saw not too long ago make his debut here in the Competizione Performance League, albeit down in GT4. Now he gets his GT3 debut in the 777. Christophe Dupois in 18th with Didier Potvin in 19th, Stephen Black in 20th, and Sanchez, of course, as aforementioned, in 21st. So coming up into the last 2 minutes of free practice, just before we get into the scope of the qualifying predictions, as we go to see on board with any drivers still left out on track. I believe we've got 3 to speak of at this time, and still out on track at this time appears to be that of David Tanguay with Bentley competing up in the pro category. We'll stay on board with the number 30 as we get into the discussion of balance of performance before we get into qualifying today. Taking a look, it is a cornucopia of available choices here. Audi, Lexus, Nissan, Bentley, Mercedes, Ford, Porsche, Aston Martin, BMW, McLaren, Lamborghini and Ferrari, all having entered in this championship, all having places on the balance of performance charts. We see here on the broad end of it, Audi losing 40 kilos, Lexus losing 37, Nissan losing 21, with Bentley on your screens at the moment losing only 13 kilos. Bear in mind, they're already a considerably lightweight car, deceptively so given the enormous size of the 2018 Continental. Nonetheless, 13 kilos off of the Continental this time around. Mercedes losing only 2 kilos. By contrast, minuscule changes for the AMG. Then up into the positives, Ford gaining 7, and it's a peculiar sign to not see Ford on the broad end of BOP charts, normally gaining double figures and normally the worst off of any car on the grid. Now they find themselves only with 7 kilos to play with, really no harm, no foul when compared to the rest of the field. Up ahead of them, Porsche and Aston Martin set to gain 10 kilos apiece there, with BMW gaining 14 kilos, McLaren gaining 17, Lamborghini 18, and Ferrari gaining 19. definitely a lot to consider, especially up over that front row when you consider there is quite the large disparagement in terms of benefit over loss when you consider the fight going on between Lexus and Ford up that front row. We just see there David Tangway pulling it to one side out through Stowe Corner. Down across the line a moment ago, the 707 ends free practice 21st, as we do see, I believe, a 22nd driver has now joined us on this field. I am curious to know who that might be. Taking a look around. Try and see. It's a curious case indeed for Sanchez, just denoting that as well. The number 91 didn't put a single time in over the course of free practice. So in towards 30 minutes of qualifying, this is going to be absolutely mission critical for these drivers here. It's going to dictate the next 3 grids we're set to see here in Silverstone. Getting on board with a leading car out of the paddock then, the 119 of Christian Lebay. Of course, we saw his debut in Suzuka for a first of a mainline competitive entry at the debut of Season 5 of the NLRL Sunday League, and that was to mixed results, but nonetheless was showing very positive signs of improvement. It could very well have been his race to fight for had there not been the incident down at turn 11 between himself and Cas van Veltzen, and that of course of David Tangway as well. That huge collision that marked the first round of the championship's woes. On board then with the Ford, number 119 making his way around Stowe Corner. And we'll get onto a full tour of the track after the discussion of the qualifying predictions. Pulling them up though to the right hand side of your screen, we see what is currently the comprehensive breakdown of the top 10 as according to data taken from Simbot. Now take this with a pinch of salt, as it doesn't appear that every driver featured on this top 10 are present on today's grid. Of course, that is still remains to be seen, and we'll hope that every driver featured on that qualifying prediction can make their way onto this grid. Otherwise, it does open up some gaps further down the line. Taking a look up the front row then, divided by only the scope of 15 thousandths of a second, and mind you, not the closest gap on this grid is that leading pair. Christian Lebay ahead of Zalan Such, but as we saw towards the end of free practice, definite signs that that Lexus has got a little bit more up its sleeve than what we originally had believed for the number 45. We saw them 3/10 faster than Lebay by the end of free practice today. We'll see whether or not, though, in a fraction of the time they've had here into qualifying, only 30 minutes to play with as opposed to 4 hours, that Such can deliver on promises such as that. Nonetheless, looking further down the line, Bayer and Milch, the 2 Lamborghinis comprised in the second row, and we saw that to be a repeat trend towards the end of free practice, with every chance today then for both the Lamborghinis to challenge for the back of the podium. Third and fourth currently then for Bayer and Milch. Brooklyn Donkin in 5th place at the moment, 158.325, and then we see the closest gap emerge in 6th and 7th. That's Tangway and Jenkins, separate by 3 thousandths of a second. Then only 67 thousandths of a second away from 7th down into 8th is Jenkins to Jorbe van Herle. Then Kevin Quain 9th and Elias Svenningsson in 10th place. It's going to make an interesting grid today then. A lot of open expectations, a lot of drivers we've seen compete in different fields but now get to congregate under the veil of racing here in the World Series, and I imagine this probably isn't their first rodeo together on the grid. We could definitely make the argument for a decent assortment of drivers here, a lot of which we've seen make their way into another large melting pot on the international scale, that being the NLRL Sunday League. We see here Fuller Bay down through Stowe Corner in towards Vale and Club. We'll go to catch on board unless he's onto another flying lap here, because we have sort of began the tour of the track a little bit late whilst we were still reeling from discussions of the qualifying predictions. We'll stay on board though with Lebay over the course of this first flying lap to denote the baseline for this session. And one definite baseline indeed. His way out through towards Village, out through Farm Curve, in towards Village. This section of the track was introduced at the turn of the decade in towards 2010, just after the global financial crisis forced a bid away from Donington Park to fight against Silverstone for the home of the British Grand Prix into the new regulation wave. This whole area, constructed in the span of just a few years, is known as the Arena section, replaced the bridge section that had been with the track since its inception in 1948. down through Luffield, down towards the line then. Labay to be the baseline time, I should say, here in qualifying. The 119 down towards the line. Then from behind him, we see emerging the number 45. So Zalan Such in close... yes, it is Zalan Such in close pursuit. 158.410, your first flying lap from Labay. Then to the line, the 45, but looks to be onto another flying lap there. So it's Karl Martel to make the second time of the session. Then we see here for Jonas Franke in the number 413. This is in the AM category, mind you, for Black Nitro Racing. We saw them leading in that category towards the end of free practice, and they make quite the decent first impression there, less than half a second away from the fastest time set. You see down across the line was the number 30 in close unison to the 35. That's two of the Malwar Racing cars. They're the BMW of Didier Potvin and the Bentley of David Tangre. Both of them miss out to the mark, though, by the twin Lamborghinis, Lucas Milch and Rafael Bayer, most recently taking up 4th and 2nd. Black Nitro Racing interceding a crowd of Malwar Racing cars inside of that top 5, securing 2nd, 3rd and 4th in their first flurry. Across the line a moment ago, we also saw was the among several drivers there, the number 1 of Jorge Martinez, competing now up in the pro category, the number 1 on his way round Copse Corner. We'll get a full look at the track, of course, with plenty of time to do so, but taking a look at the first flurry of times, reeling in across the board. We also saw onto the charts there, JM Quito, the number 26, was temporarily inside of that top 10, but down across the line just a moment ago, we saw the introduction of the number 65. His teammate Sergio Belda, 8th fastest, now ahead of Christophe Dupois, and then we also saw onto the charts as well was Brandon Carr in the 777. Nearest to the line, the number 5. So we're going to go to catch on board here with Richard Cecil on his way down towards the line. An 8th fastest there for the number 5. That makes division 2nd for the AMS. We do see that much in the same vein as we saw for a few drivers, it seems to be the case here that our graphics may be a little bit out of date. It still shows Richard Cecil up in the pros, but as far as we're concerned, based off of the ranking system we were given on the run-up towards today's event, him having a red placard would mean that he's competing down in the AMS. We'll wait for verification on that one, but regardless, that's in the top 10 at the moment for Cecil. We also saw that makes now 3 Porsches, my mistake, they're inside of the top 10 with Jonas Franke 3rd fastest in the session thus far. Then we also have Martinez and Cecil 9th and 10th as it stands right now. Richard Cecil, of course, has quite the experience racing with Porsches. We actually had the pleasure of seeing some of the photos of some of his older race cars, and I must say, quite the eccentric collection there indeed. It's great to see him then back behind the wheel in this time in the 992. Makes his way down towards the Hamilton Straight. In the meantime, we have seen a shift up in performance there from Black Nitro Racing, as now Jonas Franke drops down to 4th, Lucas Milch to 2nd, and now Rafael Bayer to 3rd. Ahead of his teammate by, at the scope of it there, 45 thousandths of a second. So really not too great a distance between Bayer and Franke. Black Nitro Racing are really coming into this championship with a vengeance here. This is their second go-around, and it's the case for quite a few of the drivers on this grid. Of course, when we first tried to get things kicked off at the start of February, there were a lot of issues, I believe, regarding PlayStation Network. So it was a case where the session was forced to be red flagged, with a great majority of the field from Competizione Performance League competing on PlayStation. We do see, though, now on the second go-around, there is somewhat more of an even split here between PlayStation and Xbox, so hopefully not to see any issues like that again. Nearest to the line, the number 5, so we go to catch back on board with Richard C. So the question there and remains, can he breach his way back into the top 10? Across the line he goes, and yes, he can, right to the very end there of the top 10, up and ahead of Sergio Belda by 0.03 of a second in the number 5. Nearest to the line, the number 113, Kyle Jenkins with Ferrari. Then behind him, the 119, currently leading the session by a single tenth. Can there be an extension? Yes, there can, by 213 thousandths over, now to what is 313 thousandths outright. But there we see to the chart, Zalan Such in the number 45. Lexus RCF, fastest time of the session thus far, 1:58.062. Up and ahead by 135 thousandths. Just shy of 2 tenths there. Lexus now faster, leveraging some of that beneficial balance of performance. Taking a look here with Zalan Such, making his way down through Maggots, Beckett's and Chapel. Heading in towards the line, quite a few drivers here. We see among them was the 20, actually not the 26 there, it was And I really have to get my eyesight checked. It was the 28 and the 29. We see Lucas Milch now fastest by 25 thousandths. Rafael Bayer now to third ahead of Labay by 400ths of a second. And only away there from Zalan Such by, as of looking at it there, I believe that's about 95 thousandths of a second. So this is absolutely razor thin in that top four. Less than 2/10 between 4 cars here. You got to hand it here to Milch and Bayer. They have come into this with a proper story to tell. Black Nitro Racing looking to be backmarkers to nobody. I remember looking back in their time in the Console Endurance Series, how rocky of a road they had in the Ford era. But this recent shift over towards Lamborghini has been the sort of reform they needed. And in this case for Bayer and Milch, this has been the perfect sort of standing point here to get them right up to the top of the stage here in the World Series. And I do thoroughly look forward to seeing what this next chapter looks like for Black Nitro Racing, as this has been a very swift redevelopment of the team since the tougher times they had in Ford. You see the 119 is heading down towards the line here, so we go to catch back on board with Christian Labay. He is on for an improvement and goes up to the fastest time, 1:58.010. So we are getting dangerously close now to breaching in to the 157s. Out through Copse Corner then, as we now begin the official discussion of the track tour, making our way down through Maggots, Beckett's and Chapel. We're on board with Christian Labay. This is an area of racetrack so popular, so iconic, that it has been mimicked and mirrored in other newer designs. The Circuit of the Americas over in Austin, Texas, is often accredited as having copied elements of Maggots, Beckett's and Chapel in its design for Sector 1. Down the Hangar Straight, named after where the hangars used to be located in its time as an RAF installation, down through Stowe Corner, in towards Vale and Club. You can see there that large building on the right was constructed in and around 2009-2010 when the track underwent severe redevelopment. That is a wing, that is the building known as the Wing. We see here heading out through Club Corner, down the Hamilton Straight, of course named after Sir Lewis Hamilton, 7-time Formula 1 champion, down through to Abbey, into Farm, on into the arena section, of course newest area of the track, in towards the village, and now into the loop. And these two sort of contradicting hairpins there do make for a great attacking spot over the course of a flying lap. We see a little bit of upset there on the run in towards Aintree. Down the Wellington Straight, named after the Vickers Wellington medium attack bomber, which used to be housed at this base when it was known as RAF's Silverstone. Down towards Brooklands, believe in part named after the first ever British motor racing circuit, the Brooklands Circuit, constructed in 1907. Out through Luffield, in towards Woodcote. You see here for Labay, he is getting dangerously close to an improvement. We saw that upset between the loop and Aintree could very well have been what stopped him from breaking into the 157s over the course of that lap, but nonetheless formidable stuff from the 119, still leading the timing charts here by 27 thousandths over Lucas Milch. Nearest to the line, the 55, so we're going to go and try to catch on board here just before they cross the line. On with the 55, Stefan Nikolai, currently 8th fastest with McLaren. Down to the line he goes. Can he make 7th? Not this time around. The number 30 on his trails, David Tanguay, looking for a chance to be within that top 5. Couldn't find it in the last lap just gone. 17.5 minutes before the end of qualifying. Nearest to the line, the 45, the 29, and the 58. The 45, of course, Zalan Such. Bear in mind that this is now 3 drivers separate by less than 1/10 of a second. And you consider front to back there, Ford, Lamborghini and Lexus. A very bizarre ensemble of vehicles to make the top of any timing charts, let alone one here at Silverstone. A track that has been dominated in large part by Ford and by that of McLaren being their more common opponent. So very little surprises, Ford's at the top here, but to be challenged all the way through by Lamborghini, Lexus, then looking further down the line, Porsche and Bentley, all within just shy of over half a second. It is quite a curious case indeed. Now, if we want to consider that just over half a second bracket, if we're playing things a little bit liberally here, you could include 7 cars front to back when you consider Wright currently 565 thousandths away from the fastest time. If you want to consider just within a second, that still encompasses 7 cars, or just within, or just a little over, that makes 8 cars with Stefan Nikolai 1 second and 85 thousandths over. Nearest to the line, the 113 on board with Kyle Jenkins down through Luffield corner. Competing in the pro category down through Woodcote. Can he make his way up past Charlie Harker and Stefan Nikolai? His nearest targets, well, we do see there, that was an improvement in the last lap. So he is getting closer and closer to being able to attack here. The number 72 of Charlie Harker with Ford currently out on track down through Stowe corner. Nearest to the line, once again, the 55, Stefan Nikolai. And when we consider gaps, we must consider that one of the largest gaps we're seeing of any two drivers is occurring here between 7th and 8th inside of that top 10. This is just a little over half a second, 520 thousandths between Wright and Nikolai from 7th to 8th there. 45 nearest to the line, so Zalan Such needs 52 thousandths, mind you, for pole position, and even less to make second. Couldn't find either of those two marks in the last lap. Crossing over then into the halfway mark of qualifying today. This is incredibly thin stuff here to be found in and amongst the podium, let alone inside of that top 5, all of which divided by less than half a second. It is absolutely mind-boggling stuff we're seeing here. You see for LeBay leading that session still, past the halfway mark, Milch second, Such in third, Bayer fourth, Franke in fifth, and then further down the line, Tanguay sixth, Wright seventh, Nikolai eighth, Harker ninth, and Jenkins to round out that top 10. Even further down the line, down towards 20th, we have Martel, Martinez, Cecil, Belder, Di Tosto, Carr, Sanchez, Dupois, Quito, and Potvin. Then just outside of the top 20, we have Veldkamp, Black, and Donkin. All yet to have put times on the charts here. I think for the case of the number 17, though, things are liable to change. Down to the line, Brooklyn Donkin. Onto the timing charts. Where does he find himself? 12th fastest there, ahead of Jorge Martinez, but stuck in behind Martel and Jenkins for control of the last of those top 10 positions. Locally, very close gaps to be found. There is a single 100th between Martel and Donkin over the course of what has been his first official flying lap. So still high hopes residing there for a top 10 appearance for the number 17 over the course of this qualifying session. Bear in mind, as we mentioned earlier on, this qualifying session is going to be absolutely pivotal. In the 3 appearances, the 3x40 format has in this season, the 2 coming up much later on past the halfway mark here in season 1 of the World Series on Competizione Performance League, it is going to be absolutely pivotal to place high in this qualifying session, as it will be your starting point for 3 consecutive races here in Silverstone. So even if things are to go sour in the first 2, or even just in the first race, you still have the hopes here of starting high for the remaining 2 races. It's what gives the drivers the best rolling start, as it were, for the next 2 races to follow. Otherwise, it just plays out like a conventional qualifying session, 30 minutes of qualifying, then into a race, but then that race loops in on itself 2 more times before the end of round 1. Nearest to the line, number 1 and number 5, Martinez and then Cecil. Down across the line, neither of them budging from position. 13th and 14th as it stands there. Cecil still second in division, so it stands for the number 5. And ahead of Belder for the last of the division podium in the AM category for Martinez. He's 13th at the moment, provisionally 12th in category amongst the pros. Number 28 nearest to the line, Rafael Bayer, and this comes on the trails of Zalan Such, taking the fastest time by 35 thousandths of a second. Now into the 57s, 157.975 by Zalan Such. The Lexus faster now than the Ford and both Lamborghinis in that top 4. Nearest to the line, the 58. That's Timo De Tosto with Audi. A very bizarre choice indeed by De Tosto. We've seen him to take risks before, but this really does border on almost morbid curiosity from the 58. Really just seeing, you know, can I get away with this choice? It's not one we often see anymore. The Audi, and in its time, was a formidable machine. One of the best cars going on ACC for quite a decent amount of time. It was quite the popular choice. In the very limited experience I had racing on ACC back in the TRR Sprint Series, I saw it to be a popular choice there. Had the opportunity to battle with the Audi R8 in Bathurst. But it's a pity then that this car is all but extinct in ACC now. And this is really the last sort of kindlings of that flame that was the Audi R8 in its prime. abandoned by its manufacturer then, Audi having moved on to other pastures. It's a pity then that they would leave behind the R8. It was arguably one of their greatest and most revolutionary cars. It helped shape Audi's identity for the last 20 years. How times have changed. In the time since then, De Tosto 16th in the session, and separate from Belder by only a few tenths there to be within the top 15 of the session. In the time since, we've seen an extension now up to 130 thousandths of a second in that last lap just gone, now into a 157.880 for Zalan Such. Now, we saw it to be the case that he was up by 3 tenths come the end of free practice. It was formidable stuff from the Hungarian talent, whom of which we saw before, actually on the conversation we've just had there with Audi. Now on his move over to Lexus, still favouring the older-fashioned machinery of times gone by. He's able to put serious grief up against the new-gen machinery from both Ford and from Lamborghini with their Huracan Evo 2. Introduced around the same time as the 7th-gen Mustang GT3, both of which cropping up around 2023 to 2024. Very, very new machinery when placed in contrast to the 2015 Lexus RCF. The epitome in GT car design of if it's not broke, don't fix it. A car that has stood the test of time for coming on over a decade in the sport now. Of course, Toyota has plans to replace the RCF with the GR GT. We've seen developments to get very swift underway in the last couple of years now, with that official reveal of not only its road car, but also for its GT3 project, which is set to make its debut, if memory serves correctly, as early as next year. We are in the twilight chapter for the RCF, a formidable machine, a titan of Assetto Corsa Competizione. It dominated the early meta for this game when it first released a few years back. And it still holds a candle here up against new-gen machinery when given the right set of hands at the wheel. We see down across the line, sadly not to what appears to be another improvement, but still holds it out by 130 thousandths of a second. With Labbé having crossed the line from behind him a moment ago, he couldn't find even a thousandth over that to make an improvement up from second. Number 413 nearest to the line, Jonas Franke. You know, if we want to talk about if it's not broke, don't fix it, look no further than the Porsche 911. They have not budged on this design ethos since the 1950s with the introduction of the 901 that was designed by Butzi Porsche, son of Ferry Porsche, son of Ferdinand. 3 generations of the Porsche family helped create what is arguably the most iconic sports car of all time. We see here behind the wheel, Franke out through Chapel, but a bit of trouble there as he kicks up some grass on the number 413. Crossed the line a moment ago, Brooklyn Donkin now up to 8th in the session, getting closer and closer to a top 5 appearance here. Needs only about 4 tenths of a second over his current fastest in the number 17. Now, if we're talking closer positions here, David Tanguay nearby by, at the scope of it here, about 213 thousandths roughly between the Bentley and the BMW in 7th place. Nonetheless, a 4th row appearance as it stands right now for Brooklyn Donkin. That could give him more than enough of a staging point for all 3 races. We've seen how strong he can be when pushed up against it. In his time with BMW, things are definitely a little bit scattered. We saw that in the Sunday League, but there is still great hope and optimism here on his move away from Ford over to BMW that this was clearly a decision worth making. One that is ultimately going to benefit him in the longer run, as this appears to be a car he's a little bit more comfortable with over the Ford. Nonetheless, curious to see what he'll do on this grid today. 7.5 minutes left to go in qualifying. We see here with the M4, the direct descendant of what is arguably BMW's most iconic car, the M3. The M4 was introduced in the mid-2010s as the sort of soft reboot of the M3. Previous generation of the M3 was the E92, if I'm not mistaken, the V8 model. That was pretty much the closest thing we had in the European market to a muscle car. It was either that or the Mercedes C65, the AMG Black Series. Formidable machine indeed. You see though for Donkin, he's pushed down a position with the introduction now of Kyle Jenkins making his way up to 8th place in the 113, now splitting the tide between Bentley and BMW on that 4th row. 7:07 nearest to the line. We see here, putting a time onto the charts goes Stephen Black, 22nd in the session there. We saw was 12.9 seconds away, so clearly something had to have gone wrong on his first flying lap mark that one down as somewhat of a warm-up lap for the 707. With 6.5 minutes left to go, he'll have plenty of time to find improvement over that. The number 91 nearest to the lines, we're going to go to catch on board as we cut away from the paddock. We see one of the Lamborghinis peel out for one last flurry of times here to challenge for that front row. In the meantime, we see for the 91 here, this is Ivan Sanchez making his way to the line. Down across the line he goes, and it seems to also have been the case in some previous reporting there that Sanchez may have also been moved down towards the AM category. So all of that will have to get updated when we head into the second round. We're still using some of the graphics from the first running of this event. Nonetheless, Sanchez maintains 18th place. The number 29 to the line from behind him. Lucas Milch to the line. In the time since, Rafael Bayer now takes up the helm of the front row, 75 thousandths away from Zalan Such. So you've got to hand it here. This is going to be a very peculiar front row. If Ford can't make a squeeze into it here, it's going to be Lexus from Lamborghini. 54 nearest to the line, another Lexus here, right. First name just simply M. We don't actually know what his name is, which is why we've been going by the last name the whole time here. Down towards the line he goes. Bear in mind, he's only 43 thousandths away from a top 5 appearance. He's getting very, very close to that mark. Lap in, lap out now. We saw recently as well for Richard Cecil, he's been pushed to the back of the AM Division podium by Sergio Belda, the 65 up to 14th, now Division 2nd. Both of them a far cry away from the leading AM category car. That could soon to be a change here for Jonas Franke and the number 413. Top 5 appearance at the moment ahead of quite a few drivers. We've got decent experience having seen on plenty of different championships before. For Franke, showing all of them up in a Porsche. 45 nearest to the line here. Bear in mind, his pole position is still under siege as he makes his way to the line. No improvement this time around. Still holds on to the fastest time, but that gap is withering. To the line here, Rafael Bayer hot on his trails as he makes his way down through towards Copse Corner at turn 1. Still 75 thousandths away. That gap still very thinly held between these two up over that front row. And it doesn't get much thicker when you consider the remaining 2 rows to make that top 6, because we still find 6 cars here within half a second front to back. And denoting both sides of it are Lexus-made machinery, the 45 and the 54 of Such and Wright. 119 nearest to the line here. Can LeBay make his way back towards the front row? Not on that last lap. And as we see the timer ticking down here, he's got functionally 2 more laps on track before the end of this qualifying session. Otherwise, he'll be starting from the second row, tucked in behind Zalan Such's number 45 Lexus. Not a great position to be in when you consider of the variety of vehicles on today's field. The one other car capable of outgunning Ford in the straight lines on the Wellington and Hangar Straight is going to be the Lexus RCF. 54 nearest to the line. Wright still hunting down a top 5 appearance here. Across the line he goes. Sadly couldn't find anything of it. On his trails we see the number 30 of David Tanguay. Behind him Richard Cecil. From behind him the 113 of Kyle Jenkins. All of them though yet to have made position in those last laps just gone. The number 707 nearest to the line. We do see joining the session very late in Alfie Pryor and Ben Cheeseman, as well as Andrew Veldkamp. Very late entries here, but it does bring the tally of drivers up towards 25, up from what was 22 at the session start. We see Alfie Pryor making his way out onto the track here. Very limited scope of time. As we see here for the number 9, he'll be really up against the clock, making his way down. He may just have enough time here for one flying lap in the number 9. The question therein remains, with such little time to play with compared to the rest of the field who have had nearly 30 minutes here. That's not considering the 4 hours prior they've had of free practice. As we see already, things off to a bit of a jittery start for the number 9 connection-wise. We'll catch on with Alfie Pryor just a little later on as we take a look over the front row to see that things have yet to have changed between Bayer and Such. Still 75 thousandths of a second. Things could be looking up though for Lucas Milch down towards the line out of Woodcock Corner. Can he make any position of it? Not this time around. One more lap to serve then. The 119 across the line, however, does bring the tally up now just 67 thousandths of a second. Makes the mark up and ahead of Rafael Bayer, taking a look at it there by just about 8 thousandths of a second over the Lamborghini to make the front row ahead of the number 28. The 119 still tucked in behind Zalan Such, but now has a great opportunity to fight alongside the Lexus on the run down into the opening sector, down through Copse and into Maggots, Beckett's and Chapel on the session start. One of 3 races set to follow in today's round, the opening round of the Competizione Performance League World Series. So for the 119 at this time, 67 thousandths of a second away, 8 thousandths ahead of Bayer. He crosses the line here onto his final flying lap. It has been a formidable opening qualifying session of the season for Lamborghini, with every hopes here for them to still secure a front row starting position for all 3 races set to follow here in Silverstone. Number 45 nearest to the line. Can he bring an extra time here up over a 157.880? Not this time around, but bear in mind as he crosses the line there, he still has one more lap to play with. Zalan Such still with every chance to find an extension over a 157.880. The gap still precariously thin between himself and his fellow front row starters here. Now, having replaced Bayer's position, is Christian Lebay. Nearest to the line, the 29, so Lucas Milch. A bit of a fair distance away from his teammate Rafael Bayer, but still within a chance of a great leap up towards that front row, down to the line on his final lap of qualifying. Sadly, couldn't find anything of it this time around. The 119 across the line, same story here for Lebay. At the best of times, will start upon the front row. Really can't scoff at results like that. The 114 across the line, that was Ben Cheeseman, but following on his trails, Brooklyn Donkin finishes the first qualifying session of the season in 9th, so a top 10 appearance for the number 17 as predicted. Nearest the line, Didier Potvin. Then from behind him, the number 30 of David Tangray. Then we'll be catching on board with the 54 of Wright. As we see here for Didier Potvin down towards the line. Ends the session 21st there, with Tangray in pursuits finishes in 7th. And looking here for Wright, he brings it into an early finish of the session. Number 29 appears to have called it quits there as well. Same story for the 28. Rafael Bayer couldn't find any headwind of it. In fact, looked to have had quite the spot of bother down through Brooklands. Nearest the line, the number 72, Charlie Harker. We'll see, though, for Harker, and that's if we can find him. He crosses the line 11th. 45 nearest to the line then. Zalan Such seems to have done more than enough in this time for the fastest lap of the opening qualifying of the season. Down towards the line then, reveling in pole position. 157.880, and it now extends to a 157.690 at the very end of qualifying today here in Silverstone. Zalan Such on an undisputed pole position. Number 1 comes into the pit lane. Jorge Martinez starting 12th in the session. Number 9, we see out on track at the moment. That appears to be Alfie Pryor. So does he find his way onto the charts? Yes, he does. Up 7 positions from 24th to 17th. The 114, Ben Cheeseman, last to put a time on the charts here. In fact, that will be, yes, last of the available opportunities to put times on the charts. In the case of Andrew Veldkamp, it was too little too late for Aston Martin. They'll start from 20, possibly 25th here on the field. We'll see, though, from Cheeseman. You see big stab out of oversteer in through the run of Luffield, in towards Woodcote. To the line here. Across the line he goes. Ben Cheeseman, 20th at the end of qualifying today. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all unfolds. Now, to bring back to your attention the current event schedule, and also a word from the sponsor of this championship, but taking a look in towards the current session itinerary after 30 minutes of qualifying here today, with Zalan Such leading by a hair's width ahead of Christian Lebay right at the very end of qualifying. We're on to the advent of 3 back-to-back 40-minute races. Race 1, Race 2 and Race 3 all set to happen end from end here, with the very likely possibility that all 3 of those grids will be dictated by the qualifying session we've just bared witness to. And moreover, before we get on to the scope of that grid, this series is brought to you by Malwar Transport, oversized cargo and trucking logistics specialists of Quebec. Visit their website on www.malwar-transport.ca. Taking a look then back to the grid as we wait for the formation process here on round one of the championship, bringing ourselves up to date on where we stand in the championship here. The staging point on February 21st. You'll be joining us again next Saturday for the Circuit Paul Ricard onto the 120-minute races. So subsidizing what has been 3 races back-to-back will be a single 2-hour race coming up at the former home of the French Grand Prix. That will carry on the current state of things from round 2 all the way to round 6, with round 7 picking back up on the 3x40 layout. That will again be followed up 2 rounds later on the penultimate round of the championship at the Hungaroring. So we are finding ourselves here starting on the rarer of 2 layouts. The bulk of the season then made up by the 2-hour races. So Zalan Such leads almost by the same margin that he ended free practice on. It was 3 tenths at the end of free practice. It's just 2.5 tenths at the end of qualifying. Taking a look at that total grid then, with just about 3 minutes before the formation lap here, Zalan Such on pole position with Christian Lebay in second, Rafael Bayer and Lucas Milch for Black Nitro Racing making all Lamborghini second row. Joining them just from the 3rd row and at the back of the top 5, their teammate Jonas Franke leading the AMS in the number 413 Porsche. They're ahead of Wright in 6th place, Tanguay 7th and Jenkins in 8th, Donkin 9th and Nikolai to round out the top 10. Then behind them Harker and Martinez to make the 6th row in the 72 and the 1. Then behind them Carl Martel and Sergio Belda for an all-Ford 7th row. Then behind them we find Richard Cecil and Timo de Tosto. Then Alfie Pryor we saw on a last-ditched effort there in qualifying, 17th for the number 9 ahead of JM Quito, 18th Ivan Sanchez, 19th and rounding out the top 20 on a last-ditch effort as well, the number 114 Lamborghini of Ben Cheeseman. Brandon Carr in 21st ahead of Christophe Dupois 22nd, Didier Potvin in 23rd, Stephen Black 24th, Andrew Veldkamp in 25th. We see there joining us right from the very back of the field. That is Tom Barlow from Team Pinnacle Endurance Racing. That is the number 23 Ferrari, just having joined up to the grid here after qualifying. So there's late entries and then there's that. He'll be starting plumb last of this field and we'll see what he can make of it over the course of the next 3 races, starting from the back. About 1.5 minutes then before the scope of the formation lap. We see there reported issues already from the 114 having throttle issues. And that's been a report there from Ben Cheeseman in the 114 starting 20th on the field. Issues for Lamborghini. That will also be, so we're told, we've been warned in advance by the 114, he'll be starting from the pit lane as he attempts to fix the throttle issues with his Huracan. That's going to make for an interesting scope of things, at least in the first race here. On the grounds that he's able to fix things in the scope of the first race, that does give him still the running start from 20th in the next 2 races to follow. So that's the advantage our drivers find out of this structure. So then as we get on board in about 15 seconds time here with the leading car, with Zalan Such, the number 45 Lexus on pole position. We'll be back with you in just a moment's time, so you'll be delighted with the sound of the 5.4 litre naturally aspirated V8 under the bonnet of not only the leading car, but across that front row with the Ford Performance Mustang right alongside. We'll leave you on board with Such. We'll be back in just a moment's time. Well, apologies there. I think there was some kind of issue with the cameras. It ended up starting to track that of Charlie Harker down in 11th place, but he still gets a pretty decent view of everything there from just outside of the top 10. Nonetheless, we take a look here to see there's two cars starting from the pit lane, not only the 114 as expected, but the 55 of Stefan Nicolai for McLaren, originally slated to start in the top 10. That, of course, opens the door up now for Harker, of which we saw, accidentally so, now make his way to the top 10 for the race start. He'll be starting right behind Brooklyn Donkin in 9th place. 40 minutes of racing to follow. Of course, no mandatory pit stop in any of these three races over the course of the 3x40 layout. Down the Hamilton Straight, of course, not where we'll be starting the race from, but it is where the British Grand Prix starts from every year. Down towards Abbey. Now, this section of the track, it is somewhat of a prelude to major action spots in any race here at Silverstone that we've seen across the board on Assetto Corsa Competizione. This fast section here, this right-hander into the left-hander at Albion Farm, brings us down into a very heavy braking zone, quite wide at the apex here. This is the village curve, then in towards the loop. So we go from a open hairpin right into an open hairpin left, so that gives plenty of opportunities for follow-throughs, switchbacks, what have you. Plenty of options for drivers going side by side, and then ultimately that does usually come to its swift conclusion here at Aintree, and then pick up down the run of the Wellington Straight in towards Brooklyn and Luffield, another heavy braking zone that switches back on itself. It's what makes for this entire sector of the track to be so enriched for racing here in GT3. So you thoroughly look forward to seeing what the grid can make of it then over the course of 3 races to follow. So then, leading from that front row, all V8 machinery. Then on the second row, all V10 machinery. Battle of two of motorsport's greatest engines then. Go head to head on the run out through of Luffield. The formation process begins for 26 cars in all on this grid, but 2 from the pit lane makes 24 on the grid, 12 either side of it. Down towards the line here at the home of the British Grand Prix. Not too long from now, racing to get underway. One of 3 races today here in the opening round of the Competizione Performance League World Series. Live exclusively on TRTN. Away from the front line then. Such versus Labay right behind them. Bayer and Milch. Down towards the line then we go for race 1 of 3 today here in round 1. Without further ado, here in Silverstone, we are green and racing. The number 1 dished a drive-through almost immediately as the race starts down through the Copse corner. A great start from the number 45, immediately breaking away from the 119, leaving very little chances there for LeBay to have gone side by side down through Copse corner. Meanwhile, we see scattered across the field. This is from the point of view of Christophe Dupont, carving his way up now ahead of Tom Barlow and Didier Potvin up ahead of him. We can see J.M. Quito and Timo de Tosto caught up in the fray with Ivan Sanchez down through Maggots, Beckett and Chapel. We see Barlow making contact there with Dupois down through Chapel. That opens the door up for Carr, looking back up over the front row, or as a matter of fact up into the top 10 as we see things get razor thin here in the scope of that top 10. You see, that is Jonas Franke looking to defend away from David Tanguay through Stowe corner up in front. The 413, that purple and blue Porsche fighting away the advance of that dark grey, black and red Bentley, going up the inside through Vale into Club corner to follow. We see there, very little the Porsche could have done. The Bentley had its way up the inside on the exit of Stowe in towards Vale and Club corner. Very little could have been done at that time for the 413. Great front row tickets to it all, though, was right, but we see advancing from behind is Brooklyn Donkin down towards Abbey. Just out of the Hamilton Straight, the 54 fighting away from the 17, also trying to get a slice in here on Jonas Franke's number 413. You see the 17 leap up the inside in towards Village. Problem is now he finds himself to the outside, so what are the options here for Brooklyn Donkin fighting with right for the control of 7th place? We see he filters back in behind. So far, a very vivid start to racing here in Silverstone. Taking a look back up with the leading pair, we see the 45 having broken away from LeBay, still very close at hand to the 2 Lamborghinis of Rafael Bayer and Lucas Milch. In the meantime, though, we saw for David Tanguay immediately getting the brakes onto a fight with Jonas Franke. We see here for Wright could very well have an opportunity to strike at the Porsche as well. We see that the number 1, Jorge Martinez, was into that top 10, but now has to take a drive-through penalty for a starting infraction. That allows Kyle Jenkins into the top 10. He's behind Charlie Harker at this time. Brooklyn Donkin up in 8th place. We see here for Wright. This is the ongoing fight for 6th place. We'll stay on board with Wright as things stand at this time. Things looking to get rather interesting between Franke and Wright. Down through Maggots, now into Beckett's, following through to Chapel. We'll stay on board with these two. Meanwhile, yellow flags out for the 999 further down the line, just to get a quick look in with what happens down the order there for the 999. Carl Martel washed out at Maggots, Beckett's and Chapel. We see them rejoining the track there. Now to get back on board with these two. Wright versus Franke down towards Stowe Corner. We just see there, Beto 2010 subscribed with Prime. Thank you very much in the Twitch chat there from Beto 2010. Watching here one of several fights going on. This is one of the latest up the order. This is for 6th place as it stands right now, as we see that top 3 just faintly in the distance, leading away then the 45, the 119 and the 28. Down through to Abbey, we see here Wright getting very enthusiastic with these earlier cuts through the corner. Ultimately, that could come back to harm him later down the line. In towards Village, now in towards the loop. Bear in mind, he's got quite the competitive customer right behind him, Brooklyn Donkin, in the number 17. Did have his chances with Wright there, down through Village in the last couple of laps. Well, in the last lap, I should say. We're only on lap, what is it, lap 1, technically, lap 2. In towards Brooklands. Now through to Luffield. You can see that the Porsche sort of treading on eggshells, as it were. Something not entirely there for Franke, taking things easy in the opening lap. Ultimately, that's not done him many favours because it's allowed Tanguay to take him for ransom for the last of those top 5 positions. Nonetheless, he still leads in division. If that's all he's concerned with, then he can't go wrong in a situation like this at the moment. His nearest competitor would be Richard Cecil, as according to the placards to our bottom left-hand side. In towards Maggots, Beckett's and Chapel. Meanwhile, looking that after the first 5 minutes of racing, Such leads from LeBay with the fastest lap. Bayer in 3rd, Milch in 4th, Tanguay 5th, and we see here the fight going on between Jonas Franke and Wright for the control of 6th place on the field. Franke in 6th, Wright in 7th. Donkin right behind to make this potentially Three's company in a moment's time. The BMW in 8th place, up 1 position, I should say, from the race start. Started 9th on this field. Now making up 9th place, Charlie Harker. Rounding out the top 10, Richard Cecil. Sergio Belda in 11th place. Alfie Pryor in 12th place. Worth noting there for the number 9. Had a very late entry into qualifying. Is now making up ground in this session. Same story for Tom Barlow for that matter as well. Just quickly cutting away from the fight of 6th place. We see here, this is the fight of 12th between Barlow and Pryor. You see here for Tom Barlow. This is a very interesting sight indeed. Bear in mind, started towards the back of the field, leveraged a great start in the number 23, now fighting ever closer to a scope of the top 10. This could make for a very enthusiastic drive coming up into the next 2 races. Bear in mind, not only do we get that rolling momentum of the same starting position out of qualifying, but for the drivers, they're only going to get faster and faster and faster. They're going to be more acutely aware of how things roll on the opening lap, what to watch out for, who to watch out for, and that is going to make the next 2 race starts, much like this one, quite the viewing spectacle indeed. We see in this fight for 12, hooking himself up over the nose there, very nearly swiping himself across the front end of the number 23 was Alfie Pryor in the number 9. Tom Barlow looking to go around the outside though in the number 12. It's worth noting as well that Franke currently fighting by looks of it there, with Lucas Milch. We see though in this fight of 12, coming to an apex then on the exit of Luffield, Barlow potentially up position. Bear in mind, still hanging around the long way around the outside at Woodcote Corner. Down the national pit straight. I think by the looks of it there, Barlow's just got that one nipped in the bud as we make our way through to Copse Corner. Great fighting between McLaren and Ferrari just outside of the top 10. But let's get quickly onto the discussion here as we see with David Tanguay having made proper offensive up towards 4th, forces Lucas Milch away from his teammate Rafael Bayer and is continuing to forward Malwa Racing's goals inside of that top 5. But bear in mind, they've swung at the hornet's nest here, and with Jonas Franke just behind now Lucas Milch, he has now made a grave mistake here. If Tanguay falters in even 1 step ahead now, he will find himself facing both barrels of Milch and Franke. Right behind them then, we've seen the Brooklyn Donkin getting the leg up now over right. But as we see here with the 17, a bit of an upset down through Vale and Club. And that allows the 54 to say, well, I'll have that right back off you. Thank you very much. Back up to 7th place goes the 54 of right. Fantastic stuff we're seeing, though, here in Silverstone. A track that fails to disappoint. Here in GT3, down towards Village. We do see as well, it is worth taking note of this. Charlie Harker getting closer and closer to this fight, was somewhat of an observer for some time, was able to leverage being in the top 10 because of that pit lane start for Stefan Nicolai, but has not wasted the opportunity. We do see him here actively pressing forth in towards his fellow top 10 appearing drivers. With Brooklyn Donkin just up over his nose, Charlie Harker does stand upon a great chance here to advance up into 8th place. Bear in mind, you can see the gateway all the way up to the top 5 lay in front of him, with Lucas Milch there, and the number 29 now hanging out back of the 30 by 1.3 seconds. With his teammate Jonas Franke potentially to come and have a go for 5th. Meanwhile, looking up in that top 3, it's worth taking note of this. Rafael Bayer now within a second of Christian Lebay. There could very well be the scope of a fight for 2nd place in the near future. Meanwhile, as we see here, this is looking to come to a head in a fight for 7th place. We see going up the inside at Beckett's, then onto the racing line through Chapel. That was so razor thin there for Brooklyn Donkin. Now carrying out of Chapel Corner. It's Three's Company in control of the fight of 7th place. We see Charlie Harker hanging out back in that salmon pink number 72 Mustang. Meanwhile, the 54 of right immediately pressing the number 17 down through Stowe Corner. Heading in towards Vale and Club. 17, you've got to hand it here between the 54 and the 17. They have shared already in some great fighting. Incredibly close, incredibly precise between the 17 and the 54. Up in front, though, you can see distancing themselves on the 3rd row. That's Black Nitro Racing's Lucas Milch and Jonas Franke. This fighting up on the 4th row has been sensational stuff here. Proper eye candy here at Silverstone. The BMW versus the Lexus versus the Ford. I'm curious to see what Harker can make of the situation. Hanging out back for some time. He's just waiting to press initiative here on his way in towards Aintree. One slip from either of these two will bring this very quickly into a topic of 3s, but down towards the Wellington Straight we go. We can see these two starting to put distance up over the 72 at this time, and towards Brooklands. In the background, we do see here is the 65, Sergio Belda, dipping off of the racing line. We do see even further behind them, Kyle Jenkins looking to go up the inside on Alfie Pryor, the 113. Up the inside of Brooklands will be to the outside at Luffield. Timo de Tosto right behind him. Looks to have his way up the inside as the 113 runs out wide at Luffield. Couldn't find the space for it at this time on the exit of Luffield. It's Pryor versus Jenkins. So we see on board here with the Ferrari. Now looks to go up and ahead of Pryor. Pryor's going to be to the outside at Copse Corner. A very scary spot for him to be in. Nonetheless, makes the most of it. Keeps his foot in. And stays right behind there. Now drops down to 14th place. Tom Barlow up and ahead in 12th place. Every chance is here that Barlow could see a top 10 by the end of this race. And if not by the end of this race, with the momentum he's carrying, he'll have an even better start next race and the next race after that. So if it's not in race 1, it is going to be by the end of this round. Make no mistake of it. Meanwhile, observing that gap once again between Lebay and Bayer, it has dropped now from 9/10 to 8, and with Bayer taking up the fastest lap for Lamborghini. We see here, Wright v Donkin picks back up again, this time down towards the Hamilton Straight. The 54 in hot pursuit here, the 72 right behind these three, almost at equal distance to one another, down through Village. Now through to the loop, you can see there a slight suggestion of going up the inside. He ultimately compromised on his racing line a little bit, but the thought was definitely there for Charlie Harker. He's getting more and more confident right behind Wright, who now you can see is properly tucked in on the slipstream there. Brooklyn Donkin trying to break the toe down the Wellington Straight, but the 54 is super glued to the back end of his BMW. Meanwhile, in the pit lanes, then the 999, Karl Martel could very well be out of this first race of 3 today. Again, taking note of the gap up for the fight of second. It has now dropped to 7/10 of a second. So slowly but surely chipping away is Rafael Bayer. We've been watching here, though, with Wright v Donkin in this fight of 7th place. It has been absolutely sensational stuff here. On board with Wright once again, but we'll have to cut away as we do see the emergence of a serious yellow flag incident, this time down at Village. We'll go to look on board with some of the aftermath of it here. The 35 of Didier Potvin caught up in an incident with JM Quito with Holkianos Motorsports. These two ended up in that incident from earlier on. We do see as well, I believe, was the 58 in a spot of bother there with the number 9. Alfie Pryor and Timo de Tosto got into arms there down at Copse Corner. Fortunately, and we've seen to be the case here historically at Copse Corner, this one has not resulted in a major race-ending wipeout. So looking back in with Wright, the man in the middle as it stands right now, having fallen in behind Brooklyn Donkin with Charlie Harker nipping at his heels. This could be an interesting case for the 54. Forced to attack and defend at the same time, but he's working well under the pressure. Down the Hamilton straight into Odabi. Up in front, it is being observed here, that gap, not only between second and third, but between the top 3 is getting closer and closer. They're in the midst of a large-scale concertina in the opening 15 minutes here. 26 minutes left to go. Not even at the scope of it right now. Halfway through the race. See here for Wright, he's got the run over the BMW, down the Wellington and down the hangar. But it's here at Brooklands and then later down the line at Stowe where he's struggling to make up the ground necessary. Maneuverability is what the BMW has over the Lexus here. It is a case of straight line speed versus maneuverability on a slightly more nuanced scale to what you would see if you had, for example, Ford versus McLaren, or perhaps what you're seeing coming up very shortly, which is Ford versus Lamborghini. Down through Copse Corner, we saw sort of skating away just a little bit there was the BMW. Almost looked like a bit of four-wheel oversteer. Very nearly resulted in contacts there as how close Wright was willing to get to the rear right quarter of Brooklyn Donkin. We stay on board here with the Lexus. Still actively fighting then for 7th place on the field. This has been sensational viewing from these 3 as they make their way down the hangar straight towards Stowe Corner. We'll pick up with these 3 in a moment's time. Taking a look around the field here, we see that Milch and Franke getting closer to Tanguay at this time, 1.3 seconds and converging. But this is the gap we want to go to try and check on board with here. Looking up over the front of the field, it is the current scope of the fight of 2nd place. We're on board with Rafael Bayer as he looks to take up the helm now to fight with the 119 to place himself upon the front row ahead of Christian LeBay. I have no doubts in my mind that fight for 7th is 100% going to pick up in its absence now on our screens. But the number 28, I should say, fighting with the 119 for 2nd on the field. Down the Wellington straight, look to try and fake things out from the inside. LeBay just holds centre mass of the road, then hooks it up to the inside line. This is just standard area denial. He's allowing Bayer to get a little bit dazed in what he tries to do to get around the 119. Meanwhile, the 26 still resides in the pit lane. It's likely then 2 cars out of race 1, the 999 and the 26, both Fords, but one from Malwar Racing being Karl Martel, one from Holkianos being JM Quito. Down towards Copse Corner, we see much in the same vein as we saw for Donkin. We saw a little element of it there for LeBay. The car's washing out ever so slightly through Copse. It can't find 100% of the grip. It's almost a very shallow drift down through what is effectively turn 1 of this race. Rafael Bayer, you can see in comparison to the Ford, is able to properly hammer the curbs in, hooking up over the inside line. We'll catch on with these 2 in just a moment's time here. Looking in with the 114 versus the 55. This is a very close fight here, down for 19th place. Ben Cheeseman versus Stefan Nicolai. Don't let the colours fool you. It was the case that a few weeks back that Nicolai was dismissed from the 5-star esports team. He's still driving the car in the spirit of the game here. Down towards turn 1 they go. Back on board, though, with this fight on the podium. Now with recent updates showing it here to be the case that building the gap back up appears to be Christian Lebay on our way down towards Village. Now 8/10 up over the number 28. We'll catch back on with those two a little later on. We take a look here with Brooklyn Donkin now having put a full second up over right. So it's definitely worth paying attention now to what becomes the second part of this fight for right at this time. Now fending away 8th place from the arrival of Charlie Harker. You can see there Donkin just escaping up in front of him, but getting closer and closer, emerging over the rear wing there. You can see the number 72 Mustang of Harker down the Wellington Straight in towards Brooklands. We see, though, having a much sharper line was right. Being able to keep the throttle in just ever so slightly longer was Harker. Ultimately, though, the line through Luffield is what sets these two apart, and that's what puts about 6/10 on Harker at this time. It could very well reignite in the near future, given the amount of time he's able to reel back in on Donkin. Could very well reignite their fight at this time. Meanwhile, another fight going on here. Martinez versus Veldkamp. This is for 17th. We see Martinez up the inside in towards Brooklands. Up in front of him there, we see the number 9 of Alfie Pryor. Meanwhile, Tom Barlow versus Kyle Jenkins. Fight of the Ferraris down towards Maggots, Becketts and Chapel. The 23 has had a proper start of things today here in Silverstone. We saw him early doors getting his elbows out for some fights on the grid. He's carved his way up to 12th place at this time with Sergio Belder in the foreground of your screen there. That white and green number 65 Mustang with Hoggianos Motorsports up in 11th place, 2.1 seconds ahead of Barlow at this time. I don't see it impossible here for him to be in the top 10 by the end of this race. He's already 19 minutes in, just drawing on to the first 20 minutes of this 40-minute race, and has made up so much ground in such a short amount of time. More on that later, though. Yellow flags out at, looking at it here, this is at Chapel for Alfie Pryor. The McLaren off track here, just past the track. Now drops out of the top 20. Still curious as to know what exactly happened here for Pryor for that incident to have occurred. The car facing the wrong way when we caught on with him out of Chapel Corner. Back in the green flag conditions just before the halfway mark of this race, and a sudden turn of events there for the number 9. Quickly checking in with that previous fight upon the podium, we do see it starts to bleed back out to about a second here between Lebay and Bayer. Meanwhile, looking at the gap between Lebay and Such, that actually does drop to about, looking at it there, 3.3 seconds. Such still has firm control of things here. It would definitely be the argument that it's closer at hand for a fight of second than it would be at this time for a fight of first. More on that later on. We see here for Milch potentially to put the fight back on to David Tanguay with the number 30 Bentley. We'll stay on board with the number 29 here, Lucas Milch. So we see a huge difference in line between himself and the 30 behind him, the 413 of Jonas Franke, his teammate at the Black Nitro Racing team. Could very well be a case, actually. We're about to see a fight of 5th place. As it's worth pointing out, that difference in line didn't exactly benefit Milch whatsoever, nor did it benefit Tanguay. Both of them faltered time away from the 413. We'll stay on board with these three as now past the halfway mark. This is the current scope of the grid. Alan Such leads ahead of Christian Lebay. Raphael Bayer in 3rd. David Tanguay 4th on our screens at the moment. The number 29 of Lucas Milch in 5th place with Jonas Franke in 6th. Brooklyn Donkin in 7th and Wright in 8th. Harker 9th, and then rounding out the top 10, Richard Cecil. Sergio Belder in 11th. Tom Barlow in 12th. And Kyle Jenkins in 13th. Ivan Sanchez 14th. Timo de Tosto in 15th. Jorge Martinez in 16th. Andrew Veldkamp 17th. Ben Cheeseman in 18th. Stefan Nicolai in 19th. And Christophe Dupois in 20th. Alfie Pryor into the pit lane from 21st. That could promote then Stephen Black up to 21st. We see behind potentially to go up to 22nd not long from now could be Brandon Carr. And as it stands right now, 23rd for the 777. We do see here trouble for Didier Potvin, now back into the pit lane after having just exited a moment ago. They're 24th. That could be the end of their run here. JM Keto 25th. Carl Martel in 26th. So back on board with the potential fight that stands between Tanquay and Milch. That has since grown out to 1.2 seconds, so it definitely does again bring up the suggestion that we could be seeing a fight of 5th before we see a fight of 4th. That's between Franke and Milch as they make their way down through Copse Corner. Significant change in the last lap. They're about 3/10 worth of an advantage in the favour of the 413 Porsche. More on these two a little later on. Taking a look once again around the field to see where nearby fights may be coming from. We see here on screen the current scope of things in for that fight of 2nd, and you could see that the gap is getting larger and larger and larger. 1.7 seconds at the last interval. You see here for Ivan Sanchez fighting with Timo de Tosto. This is for the last of the top 15 positions in the number 91 down through Copse Corner. 91 then fending away from the 58 out through Chapel down towards the hangar straight. Now this is where we're going to see that dramatic difference in straight line speed between the 5.4 and the 5.2. Clinging on then down the hangar in towards Stowe. The 58 struggling to make ground on the 91. But we see here a bit of a stab past the exit of Stowe Corner. Could definitely reignite things in favour of the Audi. Down towards Vale and Club Corner. We see on board here with Sanchez. And all off in the foreground there. That was Brown and Carr very nearly rejoined in front of these two. Had a huge stab of oversteer. Spun out there. Out through Club Corner. Now back into the pit lane. That again could be another driver out. This time the 777. And that has put a temporary halt on this fight for what has now become 14th on the field. Between De Tosto and Sanchez. Now that does beg the question. Who else could have... bolted away from the top 15 to have given them this opportunity? We see here Wright and Donkin back into a fight for 7th place. We'll be catching on board with them right about now here. On board once again with Wright. Back into that fight for 7th place in the second half of this race so far. So then still on board with Wright. Down through Club Corner. Great run of things for the 54. We see, though, just hooking up to the inside. It's so nearly contact. It is contact between the 17 and the 54. Turned into the wall goes Brooklyn Donkin. Get a look at this on the replays here. Down the Hamilton straight. Disaster in the fight of 7th. We saw just how close it was going to get between these two. As we see here, I'm not really sure how to quite exactly describe what I'm seeing there. It did start off with a very small nudge, and that's what ended up pivoting in the number 17 over the nose of the 54. So you see here on the exit, he's got a look up the inside. The 17 covers him off, so he hits the left-hand side of the track. There was that slight move over to the left. It's a little too tough to call it because it all happened so quickly between Donkin and Wright. The fight of 7th clearly at an end here. And so too could very well be the drive in the first race here for the number 17 as he now reports to the pit lane. Bear in mind, 2 more races set to follow after this one. 13 minutes left to go. We're right up in 7th. Just see there, I believe that's from Alfie Pryor saying unlucky retirement due to the damage I got at the collision at turn 1. Madswin, car very unstable. Car very unstable, and this is my first race in the whole week being of the game, hoping for a better result in race 2. That was apparently the statement there from Alfie Pryor. taking a look at some of the other fights to emerge here, has been one on the topic of discussion for some time. This has been the fight back between Milch and Tanguay. Tanguay taking 4th place off of Milch earlier on in this race, splitting the tide between the two Lamborghinis. We've seen that since that move, the number 29 has been very eager to pick things back up here to continue to fight for 4th place, but it's been steady, easy runnings here for the number 30. We do see up in front, that's Rafael Bayer. Rafael Bayer has spun across the track. He's stranded at the halfway. What has gone on for Rafael Bayer? It is absolute disaster for Lamborghini and for Rafael Bayer. You can see here on the Wellington straight, and he's completely stranded there. Broken rear aero. By looks of it there, looks to be damaged all along the side. Could very well be suspension damage as well. It begs the question, what on earth happened to him? This is truly one of the most bizarre incidents I've ever seen. So you can see the rear aero is completely compromised there. This is soon to give Tom Barlow that pivotal run into the top 10, but it has come at such a great cost here for Bayer. Now taking up the helm of the fight at the leading positions for Black Nitro Racing is going to have to be his teammate Lucas Milch, and then following behind them on with the 413 Porsche. But this has been one of the most bizarre changes in fate for Bayer this entire race, and that all occurred down the Wellington straight, and that's such a bizarre area to pick up damage. Was it a case where maybe he was lapping traffic and he got turned around? Was it perhaps a case where he's come out of Aintree and fishtailed? But we saw he was over the bridge. It was past the bridge. That is very, very bizarre stuff indeed. So we see here for Milch now up to 4th, Tanguay to 3rd, LeBay 2nd, so unchanged on the front row there. Zalan Such still leading as we cross over into the 11-minute margin. We're coming up into the last 10 minutes of racing here in race 1 of 3 at Silverstone. And things have definitely gone sour very quickly for a large portion of the grid. But worry not, 2 more races to follow, so 2 more chances to make it right. You see here another fight going on, Veldkamp v Cheeseman. Aston Martin versus Lamborghini. You see leaping up the inside once again into Stowe corner, the 114. Down through the Valen Club, solidifies that position as quickly as that fight started, it ended. Crossing over then into the last 10 minutes of racing, we see the physical gap start to emerge here. 2 seconds and faltering between the leading pair, the 45 and the 119. We stay on board here with Christian LeBay to recount the grid into the last 10 minutes. We see still leading that charge, the 45 Lexus of Zalan Such after a great qualifying. We're seeing, though, in the late game, things are starting to teeter in favour of the Ford on screen at the moment. David Tanguay behind in 3rd place and Lucas Milch in 4th. We see, looking here, Jonas Franke in 5th place, ahead of Wright in now 6th. Charlie Harker 7th, Richard Cecil in 8th, Sergio Belda 9th. Tom Barlow, it's worth noting the drive of that 23 today, still fighting all this time later with Kyle Jenkins. The 2 Ferraris going head-to-head for the last of the top 10 positions. Tom Barlow started at the back of this field and has carved his way to a top 10 in the span of under 40 minutes. That is staggering stuff from the 23. Behind him then, the 113, Kyle Jenkins, very close at hand down the run of the Hangar Straight. Then further down the line, Timo de Tosto in 12th place, Martinez in 13th. Very close behind is Sanchez in 14th. The 91 set to fight with the number 1 for 13th in a moment's time. So going back on board just briefly here with the 2 Ferraris, as this is looking to be one of the closest fights on track right now. Heading to Vale and Club corner, the 113 versus the 23. So further past Sanchez, Cheeseman 15th, Veldkamp 16th. Of course, we saw that move up to 15th for Cheeseman a moment ago. Nikolai in 17th, Dupois 18th, Black 19th, but possibly the most dramatic change. Rafael Bayer re-emerges to the track in 20th place after an incident still as of yet unknown in origin down the Wellington Straight. Meanwhile, looks to be 6 potential DNFs then. Brooklyn Donkin, Brandon Carr, Alfie Pryor, Didier Potvin, JM Keto and Carl Martel. It has been a brutal first race of 3 today, with 2 more to follow. Every chance is then for either history to sort of mend itself or to repeat itself. So I'm imagining heading into that second race of 3 today is going to be met with equal parts optimism, equal parts dread. 7.5 minutes left to go there, though, here in race 1. Watching on with what has been a fantastic spectacle of racing in the late game of race 1 today. Tom Barlow versus Kyle Jenkins, the 2 Ferraris head-to-head. Jenkins looking to go the long way around town here at Copse Corner. Is going to hold it in. I mean, foot clearing the throttle of that 113 to stay along with the 23, ultimately back in a single file down at Maggots, Beckett's and Chapel. Let's go onto the onboard cameras with these 2 cutting across the field to look here from the attacking point of view. On with Jenkins, pursuing Barlow. These 2 reveling in a fantastic fight just in the back of the top 10 here. You see with the slipstream, again looking around the outside, super late onto the brakes there for Jenkins, or perhaps even earlier onto the brakes for Barlow. Nonetheless, it puts Jenkins up the inside of the run in towards Vale and Club Corner. Can he execute upon a move into the top 10? Looks for it up the inside, but going the long way around. The 23 holds on to 10th at this time towards Club Corner. Onto the Hamilton straight in a moment's time. Could he have the chances for a switchback, such as we saw for the move of Wright v Donkin earlier on? Not this time around. Down towards Abbey. It's just these micro corrections here earlier on the throttle by a single 1/10 of a second is what keeps Jenkins side by side in the fight here with Barlow. He's able to get on the throttle just a little bit earlier than the 23 down through the loop. He might have the chance now. It is a bit of a door ding blocked by what looked to have been a crane in the way of things at the very time of contact, but out through Aintree. The 23 and the 113 still nearly neck and neck here. You can see on the third person view, just in our peripheral vision, was the front canards of the 23. Down towards Brooklands in a love field. Now up to 10th place, Kyle Jenkins. Very close at hand though, a scorned 23. Tom Barlow will not be pleased with how that move went down. We would show the replay of that collision, but as you saw, we were completely blocked in the foreground by a crane, so we just actually couldn't see the moment of impact, just the moment thereafter. Very common area, though, we've seen collisions to occur just on the exit of the loop in towards Aintree. It's where the section of the track flattens out, gives us a run into a fast left-hander. The drivers naturally wash over to the right-hand side there, and that ultimately leads to them converging paths and smashing into one another. Such was the case here for the 23 and the 113. Fortunately, to a case where it's not led to substantial damages between the pair, dropping into the last 5 minutes. It's also worth taking note of the gap currently between the 119 and the 45 as that picks up closer and closer. The number 39 of, just quickly taking a look in here, the 39, which I believe was Dupois, just got passed up by the 119 and the 45. Their gap now resides at 1.3 seconds. So there is the chance before the end of this first race for a fight of the lead. And it took very nearly 40 minutes to reach this point. This is one we will be keeping a close eye on, but looking back on with the saga of the 2 Ferraris at the back of the top 10. Now from the newly found attacking point of view here for Tom Barlow. You consider for how long these 2 have been fighting for, this is quite brilliant stuff to see. Now, albeit the gap is starting to grow in favour of the 113, finally having shaken himself out from behind the 23. And Tom Barlow put on a fierce defence there in the time he held on to 10th place. Three minutes, 20 seconds left to go. Functionally looking at the advent of looking at it here, I believe looking at it, scope of maybe 2 more laps before the end of this race from the point of view of the leading pair, the 45 and the 119, currently making their way down towards the arena section. From our driver's point of view here for the battle of 10th place, Barlow v Jenkins, they're down through Maggots, Beckett's and Chapel, down towards the hangar straight as their fight starts to go a little bit on ice here. The 0.6 of a second gap now grows further to 0.7, now at 3/4 of a second. Their fight starting to fade out as a few more bleed into frames. Still ongoing then, Cheeseman v Nikolai for 15th on the field, but let's go and get a look on board here with what is very quickly growing to be a leading fight between the 45 and the 119. So it will be the case where these two drivers have just about 2 more laps to play with here as they cross the line. That second lap will show up in a mere matter of seconds from the end of the session officially. So this one going right down to the ragged edge between the 45 and the 119. We're on board with Christian LeBay, hunting down a race win here in the World Series. No stranger to victories here in Competizione Performance League, but to kick off this series, he'd be high off the successes of a race win right here and now. Alan Such, though, definitely has a word to say of it. The 45 has put on a formidable show of force through both qualifying and in race 1 itself. We see, though, in the latter end of this first of 3, the Lexus showing definite signs of fatigue where the Ford is not faltering. You can see this is what's got the fundamental difference down between two very similar cars in terms of premise. The newer gen machinery can go the extra mile. That's what makes them the superior machine. These are two cars, two different eras, you could almost say, of GT3 racing. Decades apart in terms of technology, still functioning upon the same idea. You see, though, for LeBay, he can't afford to get ahead of himself here in his pursuits of the 45, getting a little eager on the throttle on the exit of the loop. Ultimately kicked away a 10th or 2 down towards the Wellington straight, in towards Brooklands and Luffield, coming up onto that final lap here. Things hanging very thin in the balance between the 45 and the 119. They come down towards the line to start one more lap here at the end of race 1 of 3 today. So we'll catch up with these two in a moment's time as we bring up the overall display once again to now quickly snap through what remains of the fights on today's field. One of the closest at hand appears to be the one for the race lead. Picking up on where we left off in the fight of 10th place, Kyle Jenkins now having put considerable distance up over Tom Barlow. These two at the last interval find themselves now separate by nearly 1.5 seconds at the end of race 1 of 3. Barlow so close to have finished inside of the top 10 from the back of the field, has 2 more chances later down the line. We see also in the fight between Cheeseman and Nikolai still going on at this time in the same positions we found them last. But cutting back on board then with that leading fight. Back on board with LeBay v Such as things get closer and closer at a rate of knots here. Down towards Vale and Club Corner, still in the fight for the race lead. The 119 in a hot pursuit here. We'll try to catch on board then with the leading Lexus, the number 45, if we can. Having a little bit of trouble there locating him, but now finding on with the 45s. Alan Such fending away his chances of a race win in the opening race of the Competizione Performance League World Series. The 119 looking to challenge around the outside at the loop, not the loop village, now at the loop, I should say. Getting ahead of ourselves on the run in towards the loop now. 119 with a great line through, but better exit over on the 45. So this is going to come all the way down to the wire here as we make our way onto the Wellington straight for the last time in race 1. Down towards Brooklands into Luffield, I believe by just a hair's width here. Alan Such may very well have it in race 1. Heading out through Luffield, 0.4 of a second away. Had it been even ever so slightly longer in this race, LeBay could have stood the chance to fight for the win. But as we head down towards the line then, here at the checkered flag for race 1 of 3, Alan Such wins in Silverstone. Race 1 goes to the number 45. A brilliant defense of the race lead there. Formidable qualifying, and he leverages that into his first win of the season, kicking the season off on a high note for Lexus. Right alongside him then, Christian Lepay finishes second here in race 1. Looking further around the field then, David Tanguay on the podium. Lucas Milch fourth. There we see for Jonas Franke wins in the AM category in the 4-1-3 on debut. A formidable fight there for the Porsche. Wright in 6th, Harker 7th. Cecil coming to the line for 8th place by looks of it. And this is gauging off of the current results and where the categories are concerned. That's on for a division podium for the number 5, 8th place outright. And then joining him on said podium in division will be Sergio Belda in the number 65. He hits the checkered flag for 9th place. There we see at the end of their saga what was a great fight had between the 23 and the 113. Kyle Jenkins in 10th. Tom Barlow, hats off, easy driver of the day pick over race 1's driver of the day. Started from the back, 11th at the end of race 1. Very nearly had his chances to be in that top 10. That ultimately staved off by the 113 to his right-hand side. Timo de Tosto in 12th place. Jorge Martinez in 13th. Ivan Sanchez in 14th place by looks of it. Not long from his current position. The 114 out through Woodcote corner. Ben Cheeseman makes 15th there. Ahead of Stefan Nikolai in 16th. We'll get the full result in just a moment's time. I believe the only driver we're waiting for here looks to be Andrew Veldkamp. But I think... is the Aston out of fuel? We've had, in the last couple of days here, a few issues fuel-wise. I believe over in MSC, it was Sean O'Grady's car that ran out of fuel. We made the comment that it had now become the world's most expensive soapbox, and I think we may have a follow-up on that chapter, because that's pretty clearly the case. The 616 is out of fuel. Had fueled for, I believe, looking at it here, it was fueling for 20 laps. Ended up having to do 21 laps. Veldkamp is determined to see that checkered flag, but this is going to be quite a long run to it. I think he's got just about enough momentum, but what he needs to not do is go up over those curbs. That will slow him down, and oh no, he's going over the curbs. He's going over the curbs. They're rumble curbs. They're designed to slow you down. Oh no, he's made an absolute blinder of that one. I'm pretty sure that has just killed off his momentum. Surely. I mean, this has got to be, what, half a mile an hour now we're seeing. Oh, there's the Aston Martin. there's Veldkamp. You can see him there. Oh, no, yeah, I'm pretty sure he's lost all of his momentum there. So that's going to be, by the scope of it, 17th place. Yeah, the car's come to a dead halt now. There's no movement left on the Aston. There you see the final result reel in. Alan Such wins in race 1 of 3 today. Christian Lepay second, with Tanguay third, Milch fourth, Franke in 5th, Wright 6th. And it should note out as well there, Jonas Franke now in the division lead, having won in the AM category here in race 1 today. Charlie Harker in 7th, Richard Cecil in 8th, Sergio Belda 9th, and Kyle Jenkins in 10th. Tom Barlow in 11th with Timo de Tosto in 12th. Jorge Martinez 13th with Ivan Sanchez 14th. Ben Cheeseman 15th. Stefan Nikolai 16th. Andrew Veldkamp 17th. Christophe Dupois 18th. Raphael Bayer 19th. And Stephen Black in 20th. A whole myriad of DNFs then. We had a few DNSs there from Grayson Pereira, 27th and 28th. But of the DNFs, Martel, Quito, Potvin, Pryor, Carr, and Donkin. Well then, on to the topic of race 2 in just a moment's time then. Consulting the look of things. Oh, hang on just a moment. What has gone on? Oh, there. Sorry, we had a complete meltdown of all of our timing systems there, trying to just take away the checkered flag. We'll look into that one over the course of the season, but refreshing our knowledge then of the session itinerary. Of course, 3 40-minute sessions, so we're coming up into the next one just a moment from now. Race 2 coming up just around the corner here in Silverstone. Your winner of race 1 in the Pro category, Alan Such. In the AM category, Jonas Franke. Lexus and Porsche off to a raring start here in the first ever race of the Competizione Performance League World Series. So, of course, the grid will be the same as last time around. We'll get a bit more of a brief run through for grids 2 and 3. Of course, we will be curious to see, though, And we are under the impression, and now this will come up in editor's notes a little later on if we need to include this, but it would be the case where we've been under the impression that we'll be gunning off of the qualifying standings for those 3 races, and you see that our theory has been proven correct, as you see the very same grid that comprised the start of race 1 today. Zalan Such and Lepay upon the front row, and then of course the 2 Black Nitro Racing Lamborghinis of Bayer and Milch upon the second row. Their teammate Jonas Franke, who won in the AM category in the last race, still starts at its forefront, a clear distance away from the nearest AM car, being Sergio Belda down in 14th. Franke starts in 5th. Then further down the line, Wright, Tangre, Jenkins, Donkin and Nicolai. Then Harker, Martinez, Martel, Belda, Cecil, Ditosto, Pryor, Quito, Sanchez, Cheeseman, Dupois, Potvin, Black, Veldkamp, Barlow, Carr, and now we see joining us is Ruben Pereira in the 888 Porsche. So as we saw for a late joining there for Tom Barlow, we now see as a late joining for Ruben Pereira. It's going to be a curious one to see how he takes to the track for his first race of the season. He joins from the back in that 888. Just see the brief glimmers of what looks to be a bright green-like colour of that Porsche at the back of the field. So we'll be back with you in just a moment's time. 2 minutes then before the start of formation, lap number 2. On to the topic of race 2 then here in Silverstone.
Seconds. 20 seconds.
So then, on board with Zalan Such, once again taking us away at the forefront of racing here, this time around in race 2. We see 2 pit lane starts already there, one of which appeared to be the 999 of Karl Martel. We'll have a look there in a moment's time to see precisely who is among that tally. We also see Stefan Nicolai on another pit lane start for the number 55. We see as well in the time since the 114 appears to have repaired the throttle issues for the Lamborghini. So we'll be starting on track here for race 2 as expected, and with 2 free positions courtesy of those pit lane starts from Martel and Nicolai. So again, that does land itself in pretty decent stead here for Charlie Harker, once again promoted to the top 10 in the number 72. They'll have a great opportunity once again to fight as part of that budding 3, as it were, earlier on in race 1, fighting with Wright in the number 54 Lexus. As for the 113 as well, Kyle Jenkins could definitely find better fortune in this race today. We see, though, I think definitely come to expect a much more enthusiastic start to the race from the Lamborghinis, from Milch and from Bayer. We do have reports from the 114 that while, yes, they were able to get at least somewhat of the throttle fixed, it was still dying in the last couple of laps. So they're just going to wing it through this race and see what happens. You see here, this is with Rafael Bayer. The twin Lamborghinis on that second row. They've got their teammate just behind them, Jonas Franke. And it still raises plenty of questions, and I'll be very curious to find this out over the next couple of days before we get up towards round 2 later down the line at the Circuit Paul Ricard. I'm really curious to know what on earth did actually happen down the Wellington Straight there. Were we caught on with the aftermath of things when we were watching with the drivers a little further down the line? We were watching with Franke v Tangway, I think it was at the time. We saw there stranded on the Wellington was the 28, and it was Rafael Bayer, and he was completely, the back end of the car was completely smashed in. The rear aero was fully compromised, but weirdly enough, the front aero was fine, or at least appeared fine. So it does raise plenty of questions. How on earth do you end up with damage like that? Unless it would be the case that he's violently snapped around out of Aintree and spun backwards into the wall. Other than that, I just can't think of any plausible theories to back up how he ended up with damage like that on a straightaway. Moreover, where we found him was just past this bridge here. And this is the bridge you take to drive into the infield section. Touched the grass on the right-hand side and lost the car, says Polska Kev 354. Thank you. Yeah, we weren't really, we were quite curious. I think that was a suggestion we had, was it a case where he's caught something and spun by himself? We didn't think it would be a case where another driver would be involved in that incident, considering how far away he was from everyone. It was definitely worth the suggestion at the time, considering that traffic had just started to become a case for the drivers up over the front row. Well, less on that, more on this. On to the queuing procedure then, down towards the line. 25 drivers on track, 27 in all, 2 from the pit lane. So 1 up from the last race, down towards the line, and race 2 of 3 here in round 1 of the Competizione Performance World Series here at Silverstone. Down towards the line. How do things fare for our leading pair on the second go-around here at the home of the British Grand Prix? We're about to find out then. 40 minutes against the clock here for race 2, and we're underway. The 616, Andrew Veldkamp, picks up a drive-through penalty almost immediately on the race start. It was Martinez in race 1. Now it's Veldkamp this time around, and much as we saw in race 1, a brilliant getaway from the 45 away from the 119. The 2 Lamborghinis picking up the helm from the second row here. Looking further through the order, we see for David Tangway, who previously put the fight on much earlier on in this race. We see for the 54, Wright almost immediately reunited with Brooklyn Donkin and Charlie Harker. We see in the background there, that's the 114, having got into an incident with the 707 and what appeared to be another car in the mix as well. Down at, looking at there, that was at Beckett's and Chapel. The other car revealed to be the 65, so it appears. The 114 into the pits. I'm pretty sure that is the end of the road for Ben Cheeseman. We see for David Tangway going up and around the outside of Jonas Franke. Trying to follow through here is Wright. In towards Club Corner. The Porsche going long onto the Hamilton straight. And that ultimately kicks the door open here for Brooklyn Donkin to try up the inside in through Abbey. This is a risky spot to go for it, but he is going for it. The number 17 up the inside through Abbey, around the outside at Farm, in towards Village, will be to the inside. Charlie Harker tries to follow through as well. So too does Jorge Martinez. This now becomes all-out warfare here towards the back of the top 10 with Wright caught right in the middle of it. Martinez looking to go long around Aintree on the 54. It's going to be to the right-hand side on the exit of Aintree. Stuck there in the grass, almost muscled into the grass there by the 54, down towards Brooklands. And this has been absolute bedlam here. The number 1 takes a bit of grass with him, and that's Martinez spun around down at Brooklands. Yellow flags out for the number 1 as we saw that incident play out there for him. We saw there over on the brakes down at Brooklands, then that tiniest bit of grass. You see just how sharp the Porsche is, to where that tiniest little blade of grass was enough to upset its balance in full force. In the meantime, then, we see here for Wright having fallen in behind Charlie Harker and Brooklyn Donkin. Meanwhile, Jonas Franke already taken out of that top 5 by David Tangway. Looking at the scope of things, then, Zalan Such continues to lead. LeBay right alongside in second place. Lucas Milch ahead of Rafael Bayer on that second row. The two Lamborghinis looking to work together over the course of race 2. Both of them saw misfortune at the hands of both fate and from their fellow drivers over the course of race 1, so they'll not be looking to make the same mistakes a second time. David Tangway already on the charge, then up to 5th and ahead of Jonas Franke in 6th. Brooklyn Donkin in 7th with Charlie Harker in 8th. Right behind him in 9th place. Very close fight going on here for 8th place on the field. Richard Cecil in 10th ahead of Kyle Jenkins in 11th. Christophe Dupois in 12th. And is that Tom Barlow? Yes, it is. In 13th place immediately. Bear in mind, it took him nearly full 40 minutes of racing to be close to the top 10. Right now, he's already into the top 15. And he's 4 minutes in. My word. We did say the drivers would be getting a lot more enthusiastic into the second and third race. We do see there a little bit of contact between Dupois and Barlow in towards Village. Now into the loop. The number 23 up the inside on the 39. Following through to Aintree there with the 39 running himself out of ground. Tom Barlow moves up ahead of Dupois to 12th place. Next in his sights will be Kyle Jenkins, a driver he clashed heads with for 10th place in race 1. Currently, he's got his sights set on Richard Cecil. So further behind the fights we've just seen there, Andrew Veldkamp makes contact with, looking at it there, that's with Christophe Dupois. Huge wipeout down at Brooklands. Having to go the long way around them was JM Quito rejoining the track there in front of Brandon Carr. Timo de Tosto now taking up space ahead of the field there alongside Jorge Martinez. These two looking to fight for a newfound position inside the top 15. They're fighting for 13th as it stands as the smoke clears on that chaos down at Brooklands. We see here for Brandon Carr tucked in right behind JM Quito down through Copse Corner. Carl Martel behind him to make 3 Fords fighting as it stands as it's not 27th, sorry, it's the 17th. Quickly losing my grasp of English there. Out through the run of Chapel. You see right behind them, that's Stefan Nicolai in the McLaren. Nearly 4 abreast there, 3 abreast between 2 Fords and a McLaren. We see the McLaren tucked into the slipstream off of JM Quito down towards Stowe Corner. Looking up the inside goes Carl Martel. Trying to follow through then is Stefan Nicolai. Gets the leg up over JM Quito. Now in the exit of Stowe Corner. Has made up 2 Mustangs. Can he make a third? Is the real question. With Martel now in the lead of that fight for 17th. We see in the background trouble for Quito as he now drops in onto Brandon Carr. Right behind them is Sergio Belder. And behind them is Alfie Pryor. Pryor side by side with Belder. Now they both move up into the fight to the back of the top 20. Down the Hamilton straight into Abbey. Still stuck in behind the 65 though. That's not to take away from some of the fighting going on further up the field there. We see as things come to a climax between Pryor v Belder. Belder took a significant chunk of grass with him there. Very nearly spun the car out. Was able to hold on to things through Abbey and Farm. We see here inside of the top 10 the current scope of things between Milch, Bayer and Tangway. Soon to be a 3-way fight for the last of the podium positions. We see up in front LeBay still with ample distance on Zalan Such. Still leading that charge, of course, in the number 45, looking to go back-to-back for race wins here in Silverstone. Further behind them then, we see for Jonas Franke slowly but surely being intercepted by Brooklyn Donkin and Charlie Harker. Behind them, right in 9th place, Cecil being intercepted by Kyle Jenkins. Tom Barlow has got some ground to make up here before he fights once more with his former rival. Having recently emerged up and ahead of Martinez and De Tosto. Martinez ahead of De Tosto at this time in 13th place. De Tosto 14th, Sanchez 15th. We see here for Ruben Pereira, there's been a silent procession in towards the back of the top 15. Recently up the road there from Carl Martel, but a difference in line allows the 999 to completely slingshot him through Chapel Corner. And for the 55 of Stefan Nicolai, right on his trails here, he looks to potentially go side by side with Pereira down towards Stowe Corner. Behind them, we have Brandon Carr versus Alfie Pryor. down towards Stowe. The McLaren looking up the inside, goes very late onto the brakes in the number 9, forces the 777 to run things the long way around the outside, will ultimately still hold the inside down towards Vale and Club Corner if they were to be side by side, but the simple fact is they're not. You see though, for Alfie Pryor, starts this race off less than 10 minutes in, significant damage on his right hand side. Meanwhile, just getting a look once again in on this potential three-way fight for third place. We see that it is starting to close in a little bit local now to just the two Lamborghinis of Bayer and Milch. Neither of them able to make ground up on LeBay, and that's the same story for LeBay over Such, because that gap has opened up by an additional 10th. Now it's gone up by another 2 tenths to 1.4 seconds. Started in our first range of observation by 1.1 seconds, so this is definitely showing great signs for the 45. Has got that early doors boost that he had through race 1. As for the two Lamborghinis, it is not unlikely that these two will be clashing heads throughout the entire race here. And that could give early credence over towards the Bentley to come and fight for that second row. As for Brooklyn Donkin, still chasing Jonas Franke. Behind him, Charlie Harker and Wright, all pursuing, again, the same three that we saw inside of that top 10 in race 1. Fortunately for Brooklyn Donkin, he's now a fair distance away from Wright, so unlikely to repeat the same incidents of race 1. In terms of other close-by fights, we see one quite far down the order here. Didier Potvin versus Christophe Dupois. Of course, we saw earlier on that incident for Dupois down at Brooklands. You see at the moment, 3 cars in the pit lane at this time. Ben Cheeseman, Stephen Black and JM Keto. Stefan Nicolai looking to fight here with Ivan Sanchez for 16th place in towards Vale and Club Corner. The McLaren looks at the inside. Has that one nailed in almost immediately. We do see though, and this has been actually quite a sudden shift, as both the Lamborghinis in the time since have now dropped down position dramatically. I'm not entirely clued in, was it a case where they had collided with each other? Regardless, it leaves Lucas Milch currently fighting with Wright down the Wellington straight, the Lexus potentially going up and around the outside. In the meantime, we also see for Rafael Bayer, this definitely caught us off guard when we were on with Jenkins and saw, well, hang on, that's a very familiar Lamborghini. Yes, that is the 28. Honestly, it would not be all too much a surprise if there was the collision between the 28 and the 29 we're hypothesizing up on that second row to have caused their current predicament, where they are now 7th, and by looks of it, they're 11th. Regardless, Tangre has effectively gone off the strategy of do nothing and win, because he's been able to hang back behind the two Lamborghinis, not overstressing the car. He's not trying to do anything too aggressive too early, because he knows he'll pay the price of it in the next 29 minutes towards the end of that race. He's effectively been able to hang back, play things easy, knowing that the Lambos were already getting a little too close to one another, and because of that, we see now that Lucas Milch is into the pit lane, very likely for this to be the early doors end of his race here. Rafael Bayer now up into the top 10 by proxy. This has been truly bizarre for Black Nitro Racing. There was every sign for them to do well in the first round of the championship, but over race 1 it was a mixed bag. Over race 2 it's been disaster. Currently their sole hope inside of that top 5 is a driver who entered willingly by looks of it under the AM category, Jonas Franke. Now 4th place at the moment, with Brooklyn Donkin hanging in the back of the top 5. Very likely still for there to be that fight for 4th place in the near future. What a bizarre first half to race 2 we've had thus far. You see here the emergence of a 3-way fight, this time for 8th. We're going to go to catch on board with the 113. Actually, as a matter of fact, we can see here with the car leading that 3-way fight, Richard Cecil. This is all in that stead of 8th place. Right now, Bayer v Jenkins v Cecil. Quite the lineup indeed then. Porsche, Ferrari and Lamborghini. 3 juggernauts of the supercar industry. And 2 of the most lucrative names in sports car racing, Porsche and Ferrari. Now, I would say you look a little further therein, you could definitely bring the argument of Mercedes and BMW into the mix, but you ask someone who's maybe not awfully initiated with Grand Touring or with endurance car racing, what is, you know, what name a supercar? I would put it up to a coin toss. They name either Ferrari or for that matter, name a Porsche. And if a coin somehow had three sides, I'm sure they'd be naming Lamborghini as well. But that's geometrically impossible. You see, joining us in chat just now, that's Luke Wilson from Euro Titans Endurance. Good evening to you. Join us here in the midst of race 2 of 3 today. So first race was won by Zelan Such in the number 45 Lexus. And there was also one in the AM category by Jonas Franke for Black Nitro Racing. You now join us in the midst of race 2, where things have gone incredibly sour for Black Nitro Racing. We see that Lucas Milch is now effectively out of this race after what appeared to be, and now this is purely speculative on our end, because again, much like the first incident to have befell this one here, the number 28 of Rafael Bayer, we simply do not have all of the information to hand. So we're hoping the same person who was able to give us information on what happened to Bayer the first time can pitch in on what happened this time. As our speculation has it, there was a collision from these two Lamborghinis on what was originally the second row. And you can see in the case now that it has forlorn the chances to be in the top 5 for Rafael Bayer. See, big trouble for Richard Cecil. Drops now down behind both Jenkins and Bayer to the back of the top 10. ETE Wilson says, I have acquired a wheel, just need a rig to put it on. Now, my advice, and this is just from my own personal opinion, I think it's the, I'm trying to remember exactly the name. Hang on, you have to give me a moment. I don't know why it slips my mind now, of all places. Give me a moment. Yes, it's the ART cockpit by GT Omega. Now, what you want to do, you want to buy it with, and you go onto their website. This is what I did. It's currently sold out at the moment, but you can get them second hand if you really wanted to. I would recommend when this comes back into stock, you can buy it with a quite the variety of additional supports and struts, as we see here, continued fighting between Jenkins and Bayer. This is all in that current stead of 8th place, newly promoted 8th place, I should mind, as well in this time. So going to catch on board here with Jenkins, as we see Rafael Bayer looks up the inside in towards Vale and Club corner. We'll pick up that conversation on the rig in just a moment's time. As we see here for the 28, swings high and around the outside at Club onto the racing line. Rafael Bayer up to 8th, Kyle Jenkins relegated to 9th. We see approaching from behind there is Richard Cecil. I had the ART one, but I'm looking at something that I can fold as space is running thin at the moment. Okay, I mean, I've got a suggestion. I'm not sure you're going to like it, because I can tell you this right now, it wasn't the greatest for when it gets slightly older, but there is the option of the Playseat Evo. I had a Playseat Evo as my first rig. Major issues, that central rail will make your legs bow after a certain amount of time. You are effectively tucking your legs around that central steering rack. It is a pinch type mechanism, so it has the habit, if you've got quite a firm right foot, and if you had a G920 like I did, you would extend the chassis of the entire rig under the brakes, unless you bound everything together with like wire. Also, the pedal case needs constant support because it has a habit of fracturing. Because it's supported by a single rail, all of that pressure, which is at the very top of the plate, is pressing down and bending that frame every single time. So if you store it in conditions that are not completely dry, you know, like a house, for example, it does have a habit of very slowly but surely, not rusting, but wearing down and breaking. But you can fold it to be incredibly small. I would also recommend, if you're just looking to do like GT racing and stuff like that, you don't mind sitting in a reclined position, the Playseat Challenge. It is just tube metal basically, and you can fold that up and tuck that away when you don't need it. It beats having it on a desk, is what I would say. It's tough to, you know, you can't hit both demands where you want like a high quality product that is also compact. I would say with the ART chassis by GT Omega, you can fold it, but again, it's a case where you have to do a lot of screwing and unscrewing, and it was a kind of a pain. You see here continued fighting in that top 10 during our conversation about rigs. Not often do we get asked for really any advice here on TRTN, so it is wonderful to have that opportunity. Nonetheless, taking a look then, as we cross, getting closer and closer towards the halfway mark of race 2, we do see here, closest fight currently going on inside of that top 10 stands between that of Richard Cecil and Kyle Jenkins. Other closest fight appears to be Charlie Harker versus Brooklyn Donkey, but as we see here, joining them alongside looks to be Wright. So that three-way fight we saw from race 1 looks to kick back off in the near future. Just outside of that top 10, we're seeing fighting here between Jorge Martinez and Timo de Tosto. Behind them, Carl Martel. Ahead of them, Tom Barlow. So a four-way split as it stands for 11th place there. Ferrari, Porsche, Audi and Ford all contending. We also see towards the back of the field here, Ruben Pereira versus Alfie Pryor, just at the back of the top 20. Presently then, 4 cars out of race 2. Lucas Milch, JM Keto, Stephen Black and Ben Cheeseman. We see for Alfie Pryor up the inside here on Ruben Pereira. That was squeaky clean through Luffield, but had a bit of a stunted exit there for the number 9. Fortunately, that seems to be enough to keep the 888 at bay for that fight of 19th place. Meanwhile, in the topic of that top 10, in terms of the lead of this race, Zalan Such leads 3 seconds clear of Christian Lebay in second, David Tanguay in third, with Jonas Franke in 4th place. Brooklyn Donkin, of course, having mentioned before, is already part of that three-way fight with Harker and Wright. He's in 5th, Harker 6th, Wright 7th, Bayer 8th, Jenkins 9th, Cecil 10th. We do see, though, in the scope of things here for Barlow v Martinez, a surprising turn in the current paradigm for 11th. I don't think paradigm's the right word for it. I think I was trying to go for power dynamic and I just stopped halfway through. Now I have to try and style it out. No, let's go with what we were trying to say, which is power dynamic inside of that top, just outside of that top 10, I should say. 11th place now in the hands of Martinez as we cross into the halfway mark of race 2. You see for Barlow, things suddenly shifting away from his control. Martinez really starts to put the burners on the number 1, getting closer to him from behind a 999 of Carl Martel. We see, though, for Martel running very wide in towards Brooklands. That opens the door up for Timo de Tosto and the number 58 Audi to go up and around the outside at Luffield. As we saw there, much in the same case for Martel, late onto the brakes, running out wide at Luffield, ultimately stopped the 58 from capitalising as much as he'd like to. It now distanced these two away by quite a bit. Leaves Barlow with a bit of breathing space down towards Copse Corner at the halfway. Meanwhile, in the fight between Harker and Donkin, that has quickly shifted away. More so to being a fight at this time, if we go to catch on board with either of these two, of Harker v Wright. You see here, just checking in, originally slated to enter under the AM category, we now see that Charlie Harker now competes from what appears to be the pros. You can see that that balancing change was definitely worthwhile because it's a lot closer a reflection of his ability. Currently fighting with Wright, also a Pro Series driver. We'll stay on board with these two in this continued fight for 6th place, looking to try and catch on board with the attacking point of view. On with Wright, with Lexus. Once again, a driver we seem to not be able to get away from in terms of onboards. Always finding himself in the midst of some kind of fight here. It's not been a dull moment at Silverstone for the number 54. Just briefly picking back up on the topic of the rig conversation brought up by Wilson earlier on. With the only thing I would say is a caveat with the ART cockpit, the seats are quite expensive. Got to the point where we took the seat off of the play seat challenge that we had, not play seat challenge, sorry, play seat Evo that we had, because it has the same 4 mounting points, because the ART cockpit is designed to accommodate for multiple different seat types, and it's still a 4-point bracket. We were just able to put the play seat onto the GT Omega chassis, and that saved about 150 odd pounds, because it was just stuff we already had. That was just because of the circumstances we found ourselves in. We were still kind of strapped on the budget to get that new rig sorted. If you do have the money for it, I would still highly recommend going through the official channels to secure the seat from GT Omega themselves, as their seats are very, very high quality indeed. It's just a case for us where we had the seat available. We wanted to try and save a bit of money from what was already getting up to nearly £1,000 on this new rig. So you see here for Wright v Harker, getting closer and closer then, this time down through Brooklyn, still on board with the Lexus. So you saw things get very close down the Wellington straight. The 45 still leads away from the 119 at the moment at the forefront of racing as we drop in to the last 16 minutes here in race 2. You see here down through Abbey, then into Farm, still vehemently pursuing the 72. 54 waiting for an opportunity to strike. I believe maybe this one could be the case. Waiting for a switch back through the loop. He's gone for it and he has committed to it. So in towards Aintree. Can Wright find his way up to 6th place? That he can. But now following closely in his trails, the 72 down the Wellington straight with a chance to go back up the inside down at Brooklands. What does Charlie Harker do? Here on Wright, goes up the inside, in towards Brooklands. Can he make it stick is the real question. Following back through to Luffield, by looks of it, great double down on the fight here for 6th between these two. Great exchange down between the loop, all the way down here at Luffield, in towards Woodcote, back into single file between Harker and Wright as they begin lap 13. At this time, Brooklyn Donkin has been able to take a bit more of a back seat to the fighting up in front, up in the top 4. Moreover, the two behind him who were closest to give him any kind of grief over the course of race 2 here have now taken the fight upon themselves. So very little threat here to a top 5 for Brooklyn Donkin at this time. We do see for these two here, as now Wright gets up and alongside Charlie Harker. A little bit of rubbing between the Lexus and the Ford down towards Stowe Corner. Running wide there, perhaps a little late onto the brakes for the 72, but he holds his line, and this was what it was all for, is to hold the inside in towards Vale and Club. Another little rub there between the 54 and the 72, down towards Vale, now into Club. As this is absolutely electric between these two in the fight of 6th place, out through Club Corner, onto the Hamilton Straight. And it was worth pointing out, and we tried to point this out just a moment ago before these two got side by side once again. In the background there, emerging closer and closer, is Raphael Bayer. looking for revenge after what happened earlier on in this race. Down through Village, now through into the loop. Again, that difference in line. It's so close to contact this time around between the 72 and the 54. The 54 keeps it all the way on the inside. The 72 all the way on the outside through Aintree onto the Wellington Straight. Once again, what can Wright hope to do this time around? He's posturing himself for the inside. Does he commit? Is the question. No. Was hoping the 72 would run himself out of road. We see that what this has invited in, you can see that emerging in his rear view mirror, a distinctly blue and purple shape resembling that of the number 28. Raphael Bayer enters the fray for what has now become inadvertently a fight for 7th place. In towards Copse Corner, and it's worth catching on board here with Raphael Bayer. We'll go to catch on with the Lamborghini, looking to take this fight full force. On with the 28. He now enters this fight. First off with Wright, you can see all of that fighting he's had with Charlie Harker has burnt the back of his car out. We saw just how tail happy the Lexus was getting down through Maggots, Beckett's and Chapel. That straight line speed, both Ford and Lexus have by the bucketful over Lamborghini, but so late on the brakes there. That is maximum attack into Stowe Corner by Raphael Bayer. Most people would consider that a blind dive bomb, but that is genuinely how late on the brakes he can bring it to the 28. I mean, this is absolutely bizarre. It was a fantastic exchange we saw thus far between Harker and Wright. Now we see Bayer enter the mix here in the number 28 Lambo. And this does bring a distinct new flavour to the current broth that is this fight of 6th outright. There's been that real melting pot inside of the top 10, but great battles here in round 1 of the World Series. Silverstone, evidently the perfect battleground. Speaking of Silverstone as well, we'll be working alongside the folks over on HCCL in a project coming up in the next month, a one-off special event right here at Silverstone. More details to discuss later on in the month, but we are quite excited to speak about that in the future. So we'll not be long to come back here for even more racing. As it stands here in the first round of the Competizione Performance League World Series here in race 2 of 3, it has been a fantastic spectacle so far. And a very, very well-timed use of the 3x40 layout. I don't imagine the race would be anywhere near as electric here at Silverstone had it been on the single 2-hour format. I think that's what's much better utilised in the next race coming up at the Circuit Paul Ricard. You see here for Bayer, he's in the slipstream, and again, talking about how late he can put it on the brakes. That's the difference between him and the Lexus at this time. The Lamborghini is able to stop almost on a dime by comparison. Meanwhile, as we drop into the last 10 minutes of racing here, watching on board with the current fight of 7th place, just to get a scope of what the podium's looking like. Zalan Such still leads by 2.6 seconds now to Christian LeBay. David Tanguay in 3rd by 10.6 seconds. Jonas Franke leading in the AM category, 4.3 seconds away from Tanguay on the podium. Brooklyn Donkin in the top 5 in the number 17. Charlie Harker 4.3 seconds away from Donkin at this time, but 6/10 up the road from Wright at that last interval. We can see that he is being intercepted, so there was a little bit of a poor third sector by looks of it here for Charlie Harker. That's brought Wright back into the conversation of the fight of 6th place, and this has been basically the perfect leapfrog here for Raphael Bayer. The problem therein remains he's yet to find the staging point to actually get an overtake in. It's all well and good. He's been hanging around in the back, putting constant pressure on Wright, but he's actually yet to have found an opening that he can take in that number 28. And I'm sure this is all something being heavily considered by Bayer at this time. Still ongoing in that fight of 7th, but this is soon to be promoted by proxy to the fight up in front, to the fight of 6th place. As we see though, locally still for 7th with Wright. Meanwhile, there is another fight going on a little further down the line we do want to quickly check in with, but I do fear that cutting away from this fight, we're going to miss out on possibly its juiciest moments here. The number 28 looking at potentially an up the inside move here on the 54. It does nose in, but it is contact between himself and Wright, so things do get a little bit wiry here. You can see the damage persisting on the left-hand side of the 54. Now as we enter the Hamilton straight, Bayer loses a bit of momentum over Wright. So we'll catch on with these two here now that we've got a bit of a breather to discuss it. And it's this incredibly close fight between Martel and Barlow, as well as De Tosto and Stefan Nicolai. 4 cars, one-upping that previous fight. As we see here, Tom Barlow versus Carl Martel. This is for 12th place down through Vale and Club Corner. And bear in mind, it's worth noting off of the 23 that he started towards the back of this field, having been a late join into race 1. No different here on race 2's grid, bar maybe 1 or 2 extra positions because of the reconnect of the 777 at Brandon Carr and the recent joining of Ruben Pereira in the 888. Those two down in 19th and 20th. For Barlow, he has really been able to, in both instances thus far, fight tooth and nail for position on track. Meanwhile, back in on this fight for, oh my word, just as we caught on board, couldn't even gather my words for what we saw there down at Copse Corner. So just as we cut on with those two there, it was self-evident what had gone on. There, the 28 nudged up the back end of the 54, spun out at Copse Corner. Whatever carefully laid strategies these two might have been shattered like a porcelain vase in the face of what's just gone on down at Copse Corner. And that's also invited in a brand new competitor into the further top 10. And that, as it stands right now, the 113 of Kyle Jenkins moving up to 7th as Bayer backs off behind Wright, acutely aware of the fact that that incident was greatly on his own end. 28 still stuck in behind the 54. After their incident at Copse, down through Vale and Club. Still in the top 10, but a lot of that progress wiped away. You see though, in spite of that incident, that has not stopped the fighting spirit of either of these two drivers as they now begin the challenge of climbing back up ahead of Kyle Jenkins. So still on board then with Wright, catching up towards Jenkins in that fight of 7th place. Now, hopefully, the history to not repeat itself here at Copse Corner. We see for the 54, looking to try and go up and around the outside on the 113. Couldn't find any ground of it. The 113 taking a very slightly different line through Copse Corner. On the exit, however, is where things do start to look back up for the 54. On the run in towards Maggots, Beckett and Chapel. Side by side here, very dicey spot for him to be for the 113, washing out through Beckett's, now into Chapel, and that invites immediately through the number 28. Question there remains. Now on the second part of Chapel, around the outside, can the Lamborghini hold on to it? It's so close here between the 28 and the 113, rubbing doors down the hangar straight. This could be the harbinger for a serious incident coming up just around the corner here at Stowe. Down towards Vale and Club. Jenkins will not be happy with being muscled around like that. Make no mistake of it, in towards Vale and Club Corner. These two return to the fighting positions we found them last time, but major dividing factor now is that Charlie Harker, who was previously set to be caught up by these two, is now a very far distance away. So then Wright returns to 7th place, Bayer returns to 8th, Jenkins down to 9th. That incident effectively having reset itself, but now with the new conditions that Charlie Harker is a very far distance away and can't be caught at this time by looks of it, unless something happens for the 72s to put him back in the iron sights of the 54 and 28 respectively. Meanwhile, we see in the pit lane is Alfie Pryor. Could that be another DNF in this race in the meantime when we've been watching with the fights up in the top 10? Now, not to take away from what's going on in the top 10, let's see here, as we do appear to have an incident there between Tom Barlow and Stefan Nicolai just on the run through the loop. Now through Aintree, the Ferrari to the outside. Timo de Tosto following through as well. It's Audi versus McLaren versus Ferrari down the Wellington straight in towards Brooklands. Holding the inside line is Tom Barlow, and the number 23, the number 58, goes around the outside on the 55, ultimately forced to tuck back in onto the racing line behind Stefan Nicolai. Bear in mind, this is coming up very quickly on the discussion of the last lap of racing. We see here three-way split. This is all currently in contention for 13th on the field. We see for Tom Barlow leading that charge down through Copse Corner. Things getting incredibly close for comfort now, especially in the case of the 55, putting serious pressure onto him. Stefan Nicolai goes up and around the outside at Maggots. That'll be inside on Beckett. And ultimately filters back in single file. It is incredibly risky to try and run that line. Moreover, not to take away from the fight we've been seeing here, it is definitely worth catching in with these two. They're on towards their final lap at a moment's time. Zalan Such and Christian Lebay once again meet at the very last hurdle of racing, this time in race 2. Will it be much the same situation as we saw at the end of race 1, where it's down to a hair's width between the 45 and the 119? They can't keep meeting like this. Down through Woodcote.
Leaders on final lap now.
So this is one that we'll be monitoring throughout, but we have plenty of fights going on alongside them. Bayer v Wright for 7th place, Barlow v Nicolai for 13th. Moreover, it now appears to be Nicolai v De Tosto for 14th as they make their way round Abbey. You see here, Bayer versus Wright. This is for 7th. We'll be keeping a very close eye on the state of affairs between the 45 and the 119. Watching here, though, with Raphael Bayer down through Woodcote onto that final lap. They've got one more opportunity here in race 2 to clash for 7th place. Meanwhile, looking here, 45 versus the 119 down through Stowe Corner. So we're going to go and catch on board with these two, making their way down toward, I believe they are onto the Hamilton Straight. So the 45 leading this charge in the fight for the race lead. Looking over the rear view, you can see just how close compared to the last race here in Silverstone the 119 is, and he is properly getting his elbows out now. You can see him tucking in onto the inside of those corners, taking those little extra cuts here, running that risk because he needs now more than ever to emerge from the 45's shadow. So then down through towards Aintree, onto the Wellington Straight, heading down towards Brooklands. Getting incredibly close to one another. 0.3 of a second as it stands right now. Zalan Such against Christian Lebay. The second time these two have took it all the way down to the wire here in Silverstone today. Down towards Brooklands, in towards Luffield. Could it end the same way it ended in race 1 with back-to-back wins possibly on the charts here for Zalan Such, making his way down towards the line then, as the checkered flag awaits his arrival by yet again such a thin margin today. Zalan Such wins in Silverstone, this time in race 2. Back-to-back wins in both race 1 and 2 for the 45, elated by a recent string of fantastic results. Lebay once again second, Tanguay once again third, Jonas Franke once again wins in the AM category. Brooklyn Donkin on a broadly different position from where he finished race 1, makes the top 5 in a fantastic flourish there for the number 17 BMW. Charlie Harker finds his way to 6th place, a brilliant drive there, started in 10th place, down towards the line, right from Bayer from Jenkins to make 7th through 9th. Then at the back of the top 10, but on for a division podium once again, Richard Cecil. Martinez to the line from 11th. Martel, 12th place, we see here. Things coming to a bitter end between Barlow and Nikolai. 2.7 seconds between the pairs. We see Timo de Tosto looks to pressure Nikolai all the way to the checkered flag here, down towards Woodcote. This is for 14th place. Can de Tosto find it? Right at the very end of the race here by 63 thousandths. He's just away to 15th place. Such a close finish there between Audi and McLaren at the end of race 2. Sergio Belda coming to the line alongside Ivan Sanchez. 16th and 17th with Brandon Carr on the Wellington straight at the moment, looking at 18th place. Full results to come through in a moment's time. The bottom line, though, back-to-back race wins for Zalan Such. A brilliant drive here, and much in the same way as we saw race 1 end, did race 2 end on a very similar note. All the way down to the wire then. 0.3 of a second between Labay and Sucha this time. Full results coming through in a moment's time. Down towards the line, the 777 for 17th on the field. That comes to be 18th, so it stands as the final results reel in. Zalan Such wins in race 2. Labay 2nd, Tanguay 3rd. Franke wins in race 2 in the AM category, 4th overall. Then Donkin 5th, Harker 6th, Wright 7th, Bayer 8th, Jenkins 9th, Cecil 10th, Martinez 11th, Martel 12th, Barlow 13th, Nikolai 14th, De Tosto 15th, Belda 16th, Sanchez 17th, Carr 18th, Dupois 19th, and Pereira in 20th. A little further down the line from him there, 21st for Andrew Veldkamp. Then you see the DNFs in this race. Alfie Pryor, Didier Potvin, Lucas Milch, JM Keto, Stephen Black, Ben Cheeseman. All part of that. We see the number 23 reporting in, Tom Barlow, saying he can't do the last race. So sadly, of the 2 races he's had some brilliant fights here and an easy drive for the day out of race 1. But sadly, on that 3rd hurdle, just won't be able to find his way onto the grid this time around. Nonetheless, what a fantastic opening 2 rounds, or opening 2 races, I should say, he's had over the course of his first round of the championship. A pity that it's cut short there, but hope to see him again in round 2. We still have one more race to play for here, folks. Make no mistake of it. Looking back into the itinerary one last time here, we've come out of race 2 onto race 3, so we'll be waiting to see the formation of that grid one more time. The same grid that we've had in the last 2 races, so introductions no longer necessary, and it's going to make for a dramatic 3rd and final race of round 1 here in Silverstone on what has been a spectacular opening to the Competizione Performance League World Series. We'll be back with you in just a moment's time. So then, of course, that look at the grid for one last time. Some of the major changes to have come out of that, of course, is now the departure of Tom Barlow from that grid. So we're now down to 24 cars for grid number 3, the same order from last time out. So back on board with Zalan Such, 30-second warning given onto the last formation lap of today here in Silverstone. You can see, though, the sun has started to set beyond the horizon now. I don't think we're likely to see night racing by the end of today. It's about 9 o'clock PM, I should say, local, for the start of race 3 here in Silverstone. You can see, though, evidently must be in the summertime here in the UK, as the sun still somewhat present in the sky, albeit just dipping yonder the horizon. So the track will be getting darker and by proxy colder over the course of the next 40 minutes of racing, but nothing too severe. So then, leading us away on the last formation lap, Zalan Such, already 2 race wins under his belt. The Hungarian seems unstoppable here in Silverstone. Could it be 3rd time's the charm for Christian LeBay? Of course, 2 furious Lamborghinis behind him, reveling from what was a race to forget in race 2 of 3 today. Again, in the same story as we've seen over the front row, could it be 3rd time's the charm for the second row? They've been routinely taken for ransom by the number 30 Bentley of David Tanguay, who has been across the board a stellar drive in this race. We see one driver starting from the pit lane, the number 9 of Alfie Pryor here in race 3. So taking a look around that field, the number 30 has seen routine visits not only to the top 5, but by looks of it there as well to the podium. Has had a very consistent race here, leveraging some of the weak points of the Black Nitro lineup in front of him. Those 3 cars, and moreover getting the early doors leap over the 54 right, forcing him backwards into a battle with Jenkins, with Donkin, and also with Harker. Nikolai, however, this time seems to start on track. Despite 2 pit lane starts at 55, now on the 3rd race, he's actually starting on field, so it won't be a promotion to the top 10 for Charlie Harker. He does start this race in a definitive 11th place. As we see further down the line, I suppose further up the line here, on with Zalan Such, the eagerness now by both Lamborghinis, both Milch and Bayer, to get this race rolling. I might have to double back on my words here, because you can see the sky aglow there, the last kindlings of sunlight. So I think we might just, by the end of this race, fingers crossed, we could very well be looking at some night racing here in Silverstone. Making our way then down the Hamilton Straight. Can it be a hat-trick here for Zalan Such, setting a very early precedent in this championship? Bear in mind, 3 times the races, that's 3 times the point-scoring opportunities. And the Lamborghinis following almost exactly in his trails, trying to learn here from what has thus far been the master of Silverstone in this championship. The very early stages of it, mind you. This is all the races you've seen today are just in that opening round, which is why the 3x40 layout is used so sparingly here in the World Series. 3 occasions where we'll be seeing that. Taking a look on the calendar, the next opportunity for us to see the 3x40 layout will be in April, on April 18th in Barcelona, round 7 of the championship. And the last time we'll see it will be the penultimate round on May 2nd at the Hungaroring. The rest of it will be single 2-hour races over the course of the rest of the season. A very spirited start then for the 3x40 layout. We are about to see possibly a spirited end as well. Heading down then through Luffield into Brooklyn, through Brooklands, I should say, into Luffield. For the last time of 3 today. Going right of it, 3rd time's the charm, perhaps, for both of those leading rows. Down towards the line then, 23 cars in all. Making our way down to the line. 12 on one side, 11 on the other. Down to the line we go. Last race of 3 today then, here in what has been a fantastic opening round of the Competizione Performance League World Series here in Silverstone. 40 minutes against the clock. Race 3, I should say, short to be underway. Without further ado, the last race of 3 today underway. Green flag, we're racing here in Silverstone for the last time. A great start once again by the 45. Very little to be expected of anything but on our way out through Copse, though. It has been an electric start by Rafael Bayer. Third time really was the charm for Lamborghini. Getting the early breaks then on that start. We see as well for Wright looking to put immediate challenge there on to Jonas Franke. Behind him looks to have been there David Tanguay. Also some trouble to be had there for Brooklyn Donkin, having to cut across Maggots, Beckett and Chapel. The 72 caught out at the back of the field there. That is Charlie Harker. Meanwhile, we see here for the 54, putting immediate challenge on the 413. Meanwhile, just to point this out, have a look in the background there. The Lamborghinis now put almost immediate challenge onto the race lead. Moreover, getting a look in with the Bentley, it's worth noting here, actually having to scroll in the opposite direction, here is David Tanguay, up and alongside Wright. Normally what he does there, get up and ahead of the 54, relegate him into a fight with the field behind him, but now looks to be a much more fiery response to be expected. A bit of rubbing there through Abbey in towards Farm. The Bentley and the Lexus clash heads there, nearly clashing with the BMW behind them. Another rub in towards Village. Now with Brooklyn Donkin almost 3 abreast with these two. Tanguay up to 5th. Actually, is that up to... No, up to 6th, sorry, I should say. Meanwhile, having a look up front here, incredibly close fighting. Zalan Such versus Rafael Bayer. Lucas Milch now up and ahead of Christian LeBay. LeBay possibly looking up the inside at Brooklands. Couldn't find anything of it over the 29 on this go around, but it's still incredibly close as we hit Luffield. Jonas Franke in the top 5. David Tanguay in 6th, Wright in 7th. Donkin right behind him in 8th place. Stefan Nicolai in 9th, but by the looks of it, they're having lost grid position out to Jorge Martinez. Now up to 9th place around Woodcock Corner. So that pushes Nicolai down to 10th. Richard Cecil from 11th place right behind him, pursuing towards Copse Corner. Kyle Jenkins behind the pair in 12th. And this is a remarkable start to racing here in Silverstone. A far cry of the last 2 race starts we saw. We thought we'd seen the best of it. Think again. The new standard raised here as heading out through Chapel Corner. The 2 Lamborghinis barreling down on the Lexus. A less than ideal exit for Bayer does put a bit of a block on his immediate charge up towards Stowe Corner on Zalan Such. But this is a fiery start here from Black Nitro Racing. They are tired of making the same mistakes here in Silverstone. Third time could very well be the charm. 28 ahead of 29 then on the podium. Leading them outright though, still the 45. 2 race wins under his belt, but don't get cocky. It may not be so clear as a drive to the hat-trick he's been expecting from the start of round 1. Meanwhile, we see here for LeBay sizing up a move over Lucas Milch in the 29. Meanwhile, the 28 really getting his elbows out now, driving that Lamborghini right to its ragged edge. Down towards Village. Loop coming up next. And this is truly remarkable stuff. Meanwhile, for the 119. Lost a little bit of steam there away from Lucas Milch out through Aintree. Does back himself onto Jonas Franke in the number 413. As for David Tanguay, you can see slowly gaining ground from behind him. It looks to be a newfound fight here. Donkin v Martinez. This has been as much a spirited start for Lamborghini as it has been for Porsche. Meanwhile, we see here Nicolai versus Jenkins versus Belder. Contact between Belder and Jenkins round Brooklands. Into Luffield we go. The 65 around the outside on the 113. The 113 with a better line holds it through at Luffield. That invites in more challenge here from the 999. Carl Markle looking to bring serious grief over to Ford's quarters. You can see here all of the Holciano's cars tucked in behind the 999 here, down towards Copse Corner. The 61... the 65, the 91, and the 26 all in unison there. It's a full armada on the run in towards Maggots, Beckett and Chapel. Behind them, the twin V10s, Audi and Lamborghini, bring immediate fight to their doorstep. 58 now up and ahead over the number 91. Timo de Tosto overtakes Ivan Sanchez, make that 2 overtakes as the 114 cruises on by at Chapel. A very bizarre turn of fate indeed. As we see trouble briefly for Aston Martin's Andrew Veldkamp. Now rejoins the track though on the exit of Chapel. Looking here for Rafael Bayer, still close at hand to the race lead. From behind him, Lucas Milch takes up defensive guard of the last of the podium positions away from Christian Lebay. Jonas Franke now ahead of David Tangwe. Sorry, he's always been ahead of David Tangwe. I got ahead of myself there. But Tangwe is closing in very, very quickly. Last interval showed 1.6 seconds, now 0.9. And the fight going on behind, though, worth pointing out, Jorge Martinez has really been on for it this time around. He has had a fiery start, now on the fight for 7th place with Brooklyn Donkin. The number 1 shows no signs of going away here. We know how formidable Porsche is under braking compared to the BMW, so I do spy a very exciting fight on our hands here for 7th place coming up not too long from now. Taking a look, though, over the front row just to see what the scope of that is at this time. Last interval showed just shy of 7 tenths. We're about to get an update on that. Out through Woodcote. It looks a little bit further out from that. And there, exactly 1 second and 15 thousandths to be precise. We see here the fight for Donkin v Martinez picking up. So we're likely then to get on board with these two. On with the attacking car. On with Jorge Martinez in the number 1. Heading in towards Maggots, Beckett and Chapel. You can see, oh, big slap there on the right-hand suspension. Caught some of the sausage curbs on the inside. That kicked the front of the car up into the air. And that's put a bit of a block on his opportunities to attack early on. Meanwhile, we see for the 58, yellow flags out for Timo de Tosto with Audi. Trouble down at Maggots, Beckett and Chapel. Trying to get a look on here to see what's gone on. We see him rejoining the track just ahead of Christophe Dupois. And by looks of it, only with some slight rear aero damage. Meanwhile, we see here from the defending point of view, this is Brooklyn Donkin in the number 17, fighting away from Martinez. The 7th on track. We see, though, that the Porsche is reeling him in. So on board now with the attacking angle. Down the Hamilton straight we go. Back on board with Martinez. You see just that difference in braking power between Porsche and BMW. Out through Aintree onto the Wellington straight, leveraging a slightly better run of things, but he will be susceptible to being caught in straight line speed. The BMW just ever so slightly faster down towards Brooklands, hoping to let Donkin run himself out of road there. Couldn't find anything of it. One of the most striking cars on the field then, going toe-to-toe with the 17. That golden number 1 Porsche. Meanwhile, the 72 brings out the yellow flags again. It's Charlie Harker, this time at Luffield. Even more trouble finding its way to Ford's quarters. Meanwhile, we see here, this is the current scope of things in that fight for 9th place on the field. Richard Cecil versus Stefan Nikolai versus Carl Markle versus Kyle Jenkins on our screens at the moment. Down through Beckett's and Chapel. Not too far away from them, just off in the distance there. You can see 2.3 seconds away is Sergio Belda. 4-car train, though, for 9th place at this time. Leading that charge, the baby blue Porsche number 5 of Richard Cecil. You can see, though, the sky now aglow with that evening haze. You get closer and closer to the advent of a nighttime race here in Silverstone. It ain't getting any lighter here. Currently 9:16 p.m. local, 30 minutes left to go in this race here in race 3. You see here from Richard Cecil's point of view, immediate pressure from behind from Stefan Nikolai, but he knows the McLaren, in order to catch up with him, is going to have to really overexert himself. So he's hoping that's going to give him the opening up the inside at the loop, and you can see that just past the exit, there was contact between the pair, frustratingly so. Still that crane in the way. Please, someone move that crane. How on earth are we supposed to dissect this? I mean, take a look at this on the replays here. You see the live footage, still side-by-side action. Jenkins now up and ahead of Cecil. I think the 55 had a bit of oversteer. He backed off. The number 5 was too close to get out of his way, slammed into the rear end. That crane is just in the worst spot. The worst spot possible. Can't make anything out there. Meanwhile, we see here for Richard Cecil still closely holding on to the chances of another top 10 appearance here. Meanwhile, we do have yellow flags out. The 28 was in a moment of trouble there. That's back into green flags almost instantly. We see here for Lucas Milch, now having dropped 3 seconds away from Zalan Such. His teammate, Rafael Bayer, was previously in that cavalry charge for the lead of this race, now having dropped in behind Lebay to 4th place. In a most recent incident down at Maggots, Beckett's and Chapel, it is now the sole responsibility of the 29 to hold on to the chances of a Lamborghini podium. Things have picked up exponentially then past the first 10 minutes of racing. Taking a look at it at the moment, Zalan Such leads ahead of Lucas Milch, with Lebay very close behind in 3rd place. Rafael Bayer now down to 4th. Jonas Franke in 5th. David Tanguay very close behind in 6th. Brooklyn Donkin 7th. Close behind him is Jorge Martinez in 8th place. Carl Martel in 9th ahead of Kyle Jenkins in the top 10. Richard Cecil falls down to 11th place after that recent incident with the 55 of Stefan Nicolai, the 65 of Sergio Belda in 12th place. Ben Cheeseman behind, at a close fight at this time with Wright, having fallen down to 14th place. Meanwhile, we see here Sanchez 15th, De Tosto 16th, Ruben Pereira in 17th, Christophe Dupois 18th, close behind him, JM Quito in 19th, Andrew Velkamp in 20th, and Stephen Black in 21st. DNFs then from the 55 and the 72, among others. We look to catch on board here with the fight of 2nd place. Lucas Milch versus Christian Lebay. We see his teammate Rafael Bayer hanging in behind there in 4th place. We'll go and catch on board with the attacking point of view here with the 119 out through Chapel Corner onto the hangar straight, on with Christian Lebay in the fight of 2nd. Rather scenic view then for such a close battle here. The driver's not able to revel in the wonderful sights of a very rare thing here in Great Britain, and that is a clear sky. Heading in towards Abbey. You can see there that slight difference in line. The Lamborghini's just not able to tuck in through Abbey. That's what's leaving him vulnerable on the run in towards Village. He'll have to hold on to the inside, but he does leave himself open for a switchback. Lebay, no fool of this one. He goes up the inside, but the gap maybe just wasn't there. Contact between the 29 and the 119. The 119 continuing up road. I mean, taking a look on the replays there, if we still have the moment of impact, was there ever really that move to make? There was certainly the ambition behind it, but was there really ever the space to make that move? I think there is sort of that philosophy to consider that, you know, just because you can make a move doesn't mean you always should. That was quite ambitious for a car its size. I will point that out. We're in a Ginetta and we're in a GT4 race. Oh, absolutely. I wouldn't say there's any hesitation in going for a move like that, but unless that Mustang's got a button in there to compress it to the size of a Ducati, I don't think he was ever going to make that move. I think it was a moment there of just sort of, there's the opportunity, just go for it. It's instinctive past a certain degree what these drivers go through on track. Often comes the point, even this far in, where we're now 3 races in, we're onto the halfway mark of the 3rd race right now, where logic sort of leaves the conversation. The drivers start operating almost subconsciously on some decisions like that there, where the gap did open itself, and it was open when he made the move. But I think we always knew, from our point of view, we can sit here and scoff and, you know, look at that situation, analyse that the way that we can. But for the drivers, that's the simple point where there was a move, he's gone for it, it's not worked out. But from our point of view, we still hold that standpoint. I don't think there was ever a move to have been made there. There was a gap, but in the same way, you know, there's a gap beneath a guillotine. Doesn't mean you should stick your head in it. Nonetheless, Labe second. We see there Rafael Bayer now taking up the slack ahead of his teammate Lucas Milch. Now drops down to 4th place. Bayer is not happy. You can see him constantly showing the lights there to the 119. He is very upset, and I think with every reason to be here. So this could be a very curious one to watch. Let's go and catch on board with the Lamborghinis. And what looks to be a bit of a fiery restart of that fight on the podium, on board with Rafael Bayer. You can see they're giving him the full light show as well. In that last lap, faster by half a second, so Bayer has really been hammering away on that 28. That is a deeply concerning sign then for that Mustang. One driver who is absolutely beaming ear to ear right now to see all of this unfold is the number 45 at the forefront of this race. Talan Such, I mean, he is now up 7 seconds coming up on there over Labe. I don't think he's going to be arguing with what goes on behind him here, whether or not there was an incident. Whether or not the incident from before, was there a gap worth taking? Was there the opportunity worth taking there? Not that he could mind, because he's in the lead of this race and has just gained quite a healthy dose there of additional time. Thing is now for Rafael Bayer, you can tell in the way he's conducting the car, he is not happy. He's very, very frustrated, and I think it's with every reason to be. He's had 2 races here that have not really gone the greatest for him. There have been things to have stood in the way, and at the moment his teammate has just been taken out by the 119. So he's with every reason to be annoyed, but what he's got to avoid right here, right now is tunneling. He cannot afford at this time to start tunneling on the 119. That's how you quickly forget what kind of car you're driving. And he's stuck in the dirty area. He's going to be cooking the car out the longer he stays. So he will be considering, how do I get around the 119 as soon as possible? But he can't fall into the same pitfalls that took his teammate out of the fight. Because the cycle of violence therein is only going to create more issues for the Black Nitro team at this time. Right now, they're on net neutral. They have found themselves back on the second row. This is possibly the best the race could have gone for them so far. Now, don't get me wrong, electric start from these two. And it's since gone by the wayside. But he can't afford to flounder it now. So this is going to have to be a very tactical one for Bayer. We've seen already his enthusiasm to get the better of him in race 2, and his fight with Wright got way too close through Cop's corner and ended up taking out the 54. Still not entirely clued in on how the incident started, but we saw how the incident ended. Of course, what we were saying just then is still kind of speculative. We'll wait for a race control investigation to reveal the true light of the majority of these incidents we see for the 28, possibly rejoining the track there, trying to lose as little time as possible after fumbling through Chapel corner. And we've seen that to be a repeat case for Lamborghini. Stability down through Maggots, Beckett and Chapel, an area of the track where you're shifting the weight of the car about multiple times. It's acting almost as a pendulum effect over the rear axle. We've noticed that the Lamborghinis have a habit of flaking out in that section. Speaking of Lamborghinis, we see here for Ben Cheeseman looking to fight with Richard Cecil. This is for 13th, so we're on board here with Cheeseman. Heading in towards Stowe corner, Richard Cecil in front. Taking a look here as we head in towards the halfway mark of the race. We'll get a look at the overall standings. We've been focused in on that fight in the top 3 as there's been some serious drama at hand. We see here for Cheeseman fighting with Cecil. Could also be some drama coming up inside of the top 15. See though for the 114, big stab of oversteer, and he's kept it from the line there by millimeters. Great car recovery by Cheeseman. He's fighting there, the rampaging bull that is that Lamborghini. We saw a fight going on up in front, and I believe we're just seeing it here. This is Karl Markle versus Wright for 10th place. Mustang versus Lexus RCF. We also see here some fighting inside of the top 5. Jonas Franke versus David Tanguay. Behind them, we see is Brooklyn Donkin and Jorge Martinez.
We are at the halfway mark, still a long way to go.
We'll stay on board here with Tanguay. Currently in that fight for 5th place. Down through Copse Corner goes the Bentley. Porsche not too far away at all. BMW in very close pursuits of things. Now taking a look up into what's gone on since in the fight between Lebay and Bayer. We see here on the exit of Chapel, he makes the same mistake again. So he is now overdriving that Lamborghini. He can't extract 100% of the performance he wants now from the 28 at this time. He is not happy with the way things have been going so far. We see that he's overexerting himself now, and that could very well lead to the same kind of pitfalls he found himself victim of in the last couple of races. We see here for Tanguay, more relevantly, the fight going on behind him here. Jonas Franke versus Brooklyn Donkin. Donkin up the inside, in through to Vale and Club Corner. A little scrape between the pair of them, but in the grand scheme for GT racing, that's quite minor. A great overtake nonetheless by Donkin. Leapt up the inside on the Porsche. Rare is it that Porsche get outdone at their own game here, which is braking zones. For Jonas Franke, still leading in the AMs. So still looking at a hat-trick of AM victories. Relatively unopposed here on this grid. Meanwhile for Tanguay, now has stable control of the top 5. Still a fair distance from either Lamborghinis up in front of him to make another appearance to the podium. 18.5 minutes could spell a different story. As it stands right now, though, the number 30 in 5th and pursuing from behind appears to be Brooklyn Donkin in the 17. You see here, potential fight amongst the Porsches. Martinez v Franke for 7th. We'll stay on board with Martinez as we bring up there to our left-hand side the current display of things in the standing order just past the halfway mark of this race. So Zalan Such leads by a long distance now ahead of Lebay in 2nd, Rafael Bayer 3rd, Lucas Milch in 4th. David Tanguay, we most recently saw there up to 5th place. Brooklyn Donkin in 6th. Jonas Franke down to 7th. And we see here for Martinez in 8th place. Jenkins 9th and Martel in 10th. Wright is very close at hand here down towards Copse Corner, fighting for 10th place in the number 54. Belder in 12th with Cecil 13th. Cheeseman 14th. De Tosto 15th. Sanchez 16th. Quito 17th. Nordkamp 18th. Pereira 19th. Dubois in 20th. My word, the crisis aversion there between the 54 and the 999. That could have gone ugly. Down through Maggots, Beckett's and Chapel. He backs off by some way there. Stephen Black then rounds out the standings at this time. 21st on this grid. Back on then with Martinez v Franke v Donkin. You do see now that the sun has progressed quite far beyond the horizon. We are quickly getting into the concept of nighttime racing, but will we see full pitch black racing by the end of race 3? That we'll have to wait and see in the next 16 minutes. Meanwhile, looking around the field, we see here for the lead of this fight, Donkin ahead of Franke and Martinez, the two Porsches raring to go on a fight for 6th place. BMW able to get away from them down the Wellington straight, down through Aintree, then half a second, drops into 4/10 between Franke and Donkin. It would be genuinely surprising to see if he's able to gain any more time out of that before we get into the braking zone down at Brooklands. Out through Luffield. For Brooklyn Donkin, he may very well have to start considering defensive posture because 6th place is now up for grabs. Jonas Franke is looking to return to 6th place on this field. Out through Copse Corner. In through to Maggots, then to Beckett's. Heading in towards Chapel, up in front. Just shy of 2 seconds clear. The Bentley of David Tanguay. half a second then almost between all three of them, with Martinez closing in on Franke. An ambitious run of things through Stowe. We almost saw there. Major wad of oversteer for Franke, was effectively power sliding upon the exit of Stowe Corner. Compared to the planted performance off of Donkin's BMW, you do see that the Porsche is starting to hemorrhage time through the second and third sector. Down the Hamilton straight then towards Abbey. Brooklyn Donkin still half a second clear of Jonas Franke, but it's in these more intensive corners where the Porsche is starting to flounder. We see there, case in point, as it starts to run wide. And there we see, oh my goodness, into the wall went Jonas Franke. What on earth just happened there? We saw it cut away from the cameras. We saw him run wide, but didn't imagine he'd be taking on grass. But there, as you see, it was enough to pivot the car in. Jonas Franke came plummeting towards the wall. My word, that was a violent snap of oversteer there for Franke. As it stands as well, it also created a longer standing effect for Martinez, as he now drops in behind Jenkins. Jonas Franke presently ahead of both of them, somehow still in this fight. That is a genuine surprise. He created enough of an upset to force Martinez way away from Donkin, and moreover now forces him behind Jenkins. As for the 54, he's since emerged ahead of the 999 right into the top 10. Martinez to fight with Jenkins. Meanwhile, looking up front here, we saw a very close interval at hand between Bayer and Milch for the last of the podium positions. They're at their closest range here, just shy of 3 seconds away from Christian Lebay in second. He himself, though, about 5.2 seconds from Zalan Such at the forefront of this race. The Hungarian looking at 3 wins then here in Silverstone. Of course, 13 minutes will dictate whether or not he finds a hat-trick on the opening round of the championship. But for the 45, he's sitting pretty in first place. Very little challenge there. You can see hanging around in the background was the 119, about 5.2 seconds away. Could it be a hat-trick to kick the season off for Zalan Such, given that he'll be on that 3 times the amount of point scoring opportunities? He will kick off the season with quite serious force. 12.5 minutes left to go then. We'll wait to see how that unfolds. We see for the 2 Lamborghinis down the Wellington in towards Brooklands. Milch too far away to be sizing up a move on his teammate. I think moreover it's damage control at this point for Black Nitro Racing. 2 races where things have not gone their way. I think at this point they'll be content to sit upon the second row, knowing that's points on the table significantly better than what they had back in race 2. Tanguay in 5th place, currently not a threat to either of the Lamborghinis from the distance he's at. About 7 seconds it stood. We'll see what the recent update shows us now. Down towards the line goes the number 30, and it's 6.6 seconds. Brooklyn Donkin not far behind either. 3.1 seconds in that last interval. Meanwhile, for Martinez v Jenkins, worth noting these two getting closer and closer once again, this time for the fight of 8th place, Ferrari versus Porsche. You see as well another close fight here, Lamborghini versus Porsche. Richard Cecil defending for 13th place away from Ben Cheeseman in 14th. Further down the line, Aston Martin versus Porsche, with Ruben Pereira defending 18th away from Andrew Veldkamp. You see here, Cheeseman v Cecil for a moment, down through Maggots, Becketts and Chapel. Nothing to have been found there advantage-wise as he makes his way onto the hangar. You see here Veldkamp v Pereira. Down through to Copse Corner. But a broad difference in line there. Doesn't give them much in the way of things down towards Maggots, Becketts and Chapel. Still stuck in single file. We'll see though, running onto the grass, Ruben Pereira. That does open the door up for Andrew Veldkamp to sweep through to 18th. And there goes the Aston. The 888 now bringing out the yellow flags in the area. Ruben Pereira in trouble with Porsche. but now back up and running. So green flag conditions for the time being. We see here for Wright inside of that top 10. His fight with Martel came to an end not long ago. The 999 now nearly 2 seconds away. We see for Talan Such the current gap residing between himself and Labey. He was faster on that last lap, so the gap is only going to continue to grow. 5.4 seconds as it stands right now between himself and the 119. 10 minutes left to go then here in race 3, the last stop of our first round of racing here in Silverstone. Looking to catch on board then the fight between Martinez and Jenkins. 8th place up for grabs. Ferrari and Porsche going head to head down through at Copse Corner. As the twilight creeps in here at Silverstone, the drivers slowly but surely making their way into nighttime here. In the Exeter Club corner, Martinez still trying to gain ground over Jenkins in that ongoing fight for 8th place. Fighting with that machine. So down through Luffield. The majority of battles on track start to dissipate. This one is still ramping up. So presently that scope of the top 5. Talan Such ahead of Christian Labey. Raphael Bayer ahead of Lucas Milch. And then David Tangray. All in that top 5 at the moment. And behind them, Donkin, Franke, Jenkins, Martinez and Wright for the top 10 on the field. Closing in here on the last 10 minutes. 7 minutes, 20 seconds left to go here in Silverstone for the last of 3 races today. We're still on board with this fight for 8th place between Jenkins and Martinez. Down the hangar straight we go to Stoke Corner. See up in front of him there, Jonas Franke still leading in the AMs, looking at a hat-trick of victories in the next 6 minutes here in the AM category. You see there a bit of understeer catching out the number 1. That's ultimately forced away his chances right now for that fight of 8th place, as now north of a second goes Kyle Jenkins down the Wellington straight. In the background you can see Wright closing in from 6 seconds away. Question is though, with 6 minutes left to go, functionally looking at the scope of maybe 3 more laps if we're lucky here in Silverstone, is the chances there for the 54 to intercept the number 1. We'll catch on with those two later on. You see here the 2 Lamborghinis, Lucas Milch and Raphael Bayer, a second away from one another, but rather obviously not looking to fight this time around. Meanwhile, looking back in on that previous fight between Cecil and Cheeseman, they are still in close proximity to one another. It's also worth pointing out up in front of them, Sergio Belda in 12th place is also fairly close by. There is still the chances here for that fight to continue on into 12th place. Currently, it would have been a fight for 13th. We are definitely starting to see here the footsteps in towards a fight of 13th place, getting closer and closer to the back end of Richard Cecil on board here with the Lamborghini of Ben Cheeseman. Down the Hamilton straight in towards Abbey. Then into Farm and out to Village. Cecil running wide through Village into the loop though, will still hold ground over the 114. See there, past that point, Lamborghini couldn't find anything more on the exit. The Porsche has got him for acceleration out through Aintree, and that's what keeps him currently up in 13th place, holding that ground up and ahead of Ben Cheeseman. Down the Wellington straight in towards Brooklands we go. Up in front, we can see a faint green glow there of Sergio Belda's number 65 Mustang up in 12th place. Out through Luffield to Woodcote, down to the line to start lap 18 here in race 3. 3 minutes left to go. The leading pair, not actually too long from the discussion of one, maybe two more laps left to go from the 45's point of view. They're on their way down the Hamilton straight as we speak. Down through Maggots, Beckett's and Chapel then. Cheeseman eager to fight here for 13th place by the end of this race today. 3 minutes left to go here in Silverstone. Couldn't find anything of it though on the exit of Chapel. Loses time away from Cecil on the run in towards Stowe Corner. Can he hope to gain any of that back? Better on rotation halfway through the corner, but upon the exit, Porsche just able to get the hammer down a little bit earlier, and that slight deviation in throttle is what's keeping him up and ahead. You see the back end is starting to come away from him here, so Cecil finding himself in a bit of an uncomfortable spot, having to fight his car this late on into the race. One slip could dictate his finishing position here by quite some way, as it's worth pointing out. Only about 5 seconds away from these two is Timo de Tosto in the number 58, so heading down towards Village. Once again holding the inside, running himself out wide to give himself extra ground for the run in towards the loop. With Cheeseman there clipping that sausage curb, that is what's going to ultimately upset his chances to fight with the Porsche down through Aintree. That puts about an extra 2 tenths from where they were in the last lap away from Cecil and Cheeseman. As for the 29 and the 28, it is worth pointing out again, down at Stowe Corner, they are very, very close to one another. So just quickly cutting away here from Cheeseman, we see here with Raphael Bayer down through Vale and Club. And I wouldn't necessarily call this a fight of third place. These are two Black Nitro Racing cars. They're identical in nature. They are trying to play for the same game here, looking to put some decent points on the table. Neither of these two have had the luck that they wanted in the first two races. So with their position being a little bit more uniquely privileged than the last time, where they're now able to sit on the second row where they qualified from and sit there with extra points. I think that's what they're aiming for at this time, because the last time around I think definitely showed off why they shouldn't fight with one another on this track. We see though, for Cheeseman and Cecil, contact down at Stowe Corner. The Lamborghini comes around on the grass there at Stowe. Richard Cecil proceeds up road. We see Fatimo de Tosto intercepts Ben Cheeseman as he rejoins out through Stowe Corner. Cheeseman attempted to go for the inside there on the number 5. Whatever happened at the apex, those two came together. contact down at Stowe just before the final lap of racing here. The number 45 crosses over the line to start that final lap. So for Zalan Such, this is a much more relaxed final lap than the last ones he's had in the last two races, as unlike the 3 to 4 tenths of a second the margin's been defined by at the end of race 1 and 2, we're up at 3.5 seconds here as we cross into lap 20. 45. Now, don't get comfortable, of course, because that's 3.4 and now 3.3 second gap can be reeled in incredibly quickly if you let it. But obviously a lot less pressure on the 45 this time around. We'll take another look around the field here at some of the other fights going on. Cheeseman v De Tosto. Battle of the V10s, of course. The two sister cars, the Huracan and the R8, share the same 5.2 litre engine. V10, the last of its kind. You can see there the exhausts aglow. The amount of heat those engines kick up, it is insanely hot there. Same story for the V6 on that Ferrari. Kyle Jenkins closing in on Jonas Franke. That could very well be a very last-second closing fight here for 7th place. 6 tenths at the last interval. We can see that's getting closer and closer down at Vale and Club Corner, sandwiched between two Porsches at this time. Could there be the spirit for a last lap dash here for Kyle Jenkins onto the Hamilton straight? We'll catch up with him in a moment's time, because heading down towards the line here, back on board with Zalan Such. A much more relaxed final lap compared to the last two that he's had here in Silverstone, but nonetheless, it is all the more gratifying for him in the 45 to just take a little sigh of relief as he makes his way out of Luffield, down towards the line then, on board with Zalan Such, out through Woodcock Corner. 1 race win, 2 race wins, and now 3 race wins in a row here in Silverstone. He kicks off the season with a 100% win rate, a hat-trick for the 45. Absolutely brutal. What a performance, and with every right to celebrate there, Zalan Such 3 times on the trot in the opening round of the Competizione Performance League World Series, leads by a landslide with a performance like that heading in to the next round. Lebay second, Bayer third, Milch fourth, Tanguay fifth, Donkin sixth, Franke seventh, Jenkins eighth, Martinez ninth, and Wright in 10th place. Also worth pointing out as well that Jonas Franke, hat-trick of victories there in the AM category as well. So 2 hat-tricks for the price of 1 here in both Pro and AM. So very well done to those two, the 45 and the 413. 3 race wins in division, but 3 outright race wins in a row for the 45 of Zalan Such. Across the line there, Martel 11th, Sergio Belda 12th, Richard Cecil 13th, Timo De Tosto drops down to 15th, I should say, as Ben Cheeseman in a last-ditched effort, I should say, makes 14th. Ivan Sanchez in 16th, JM Quito 17th, Andrew Velkamp 18th, and Ruben Pereira in 19th. We'll wait to see the full results roll in, though. You can see the 2 hat-trick winners, the 413 and the 45, joining them alongside is Rafael Bayer. 3rd time's the charm for the podium charge, and the number 28 finally makes it here in race 3 at the end of round 1 here in Silverstone. We wait for the last results to roll in, and we'll be swiftly off the air here. We've got some arrangements to attend to. But other than that, it has been a phenomenal way to open the season. Absolutely worth the wait after the technical delays put us on ice for the first 2 weeks of February. But now finally into the trailing end of the month, we get a result like this. Zalan Such wins for the 3rd time on the trot here in Silverstone. So too in category for Jonas Franke. The rest of the results are as following. Lebay 2nd, Bayer 3rd, Milch 4th, Tanguay 5th, Donkin 6th, Franke 7th, Jenkins 8th, Martinez 9th, Wright 10th, Martel 11th, Belda 12th, Cecil 13th, Cheeseman 14th, De Tosto 15th, Sanchez 16th, Quito 17th, Veldkamp 18th, Pereira 19th, Dupois in 20th here at the end of race 3. And then we see DNFs from Black, Nikolai and Harker. Well, what a race that has been. What a triad of races we've had here in Silverstone. An absolute treat to be able to kick the season off like this. A fantastic format to go by. And with it comes 3 race wins back-to-back for Zalan Such, and also in division there for Jonas Franke. Taking a look at where we'll be next on the calendar in the Competizione Performance League World Series, we're heading on to the single 120-minute race format for the next couple of rounds. We'll next, of course, be seeing the 3x40s in round 7 on April 18th. But until then, February 28th marks the next round of the championship. We'll be heading to the home of the former French Grand Prix at the Circuit Paul Ricard. That's on February 28th. So until then, that's all from us here on TRTN. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Take care and good night.